Ready, set, go.
Let's do it.
Bianca.
We're live, you guys. Hello.
We're live. Hey, man, I'm glad to be here. Thanks for including me.
Yeah, it's been a while, huh?
Yeah.
Welcome to NCRAW, Caleb McCoy.
Huh?
Yeah. Hello, Gariann Yochym.
Hello, Steve Steen.
It's been a little bit of a chaotic evening, but we're going to pull the nose up on this thing and get it together.
I like that.
Yeah.
Where'd you get that expression?
I have no idea why.
That's good.
I don't know.
It's pretty good.
It must be a Florida thing.
Yeah.
White
Must be a Radio Rob thing.
Radio Rob, white trash Florida thing for sure. So Gariann Yochym, thank you. Like the way that we came together was kind of interesting. I shared with you. You were on my radar, right? When I first heard of the LEAD program being launched in Waynesville, I was like, I read the news story, thinking the Mountaineer. And I was like, I have to get her on the podcast. I was like, I gotta get her on the podcast. And I did like some digging online. I did a little digging, and I couldn't find an email address. I couldn't find a contact. I couldn't find a way to get a hold of her. And some time passed. I just kind of like put it off to the side. And a couple weeks ago, I hit up Lori Clancy. It came back to me a couple weeks ago, and I was like, okay, I need to get a hold of Gariann about the LEAD program. So I hit up Lori Clancy, and she was like, she immediately responded and shot me Gariann's email address. However, in that email, she was like, oh, by the way, Gariann's going to be at the summit, the regional summit that we attended a couple weeks ago. She's going to be there. And so not only did I happen to bump into her, but she just happened to like sit at my table. And so we were able to kind of like get that conversation started. Just a little bit of hesitancy out of her at the initial onset of this conversation. But after the 5 or 6 hours of us sitting at that table, she agreed to come on NCRAW and talk with us.
And it's nothing personal except my own personal issues.
Yeah.
Just being shy and
I want to share a quick story.
not wanting to talk about myself. And yeah, but I'm honored to be here. So thank you for tracking me down.
At this point in my process of recovery, I don't take anything personal, man. You can't.
I know.
Right? Not
You
at
really
all.
can't.
The first time I met her over there at
The rally.
the rally.
You remember she talked to us, right?
So I went up to
Yeah.
her, right, and I was like, well, I messaged you on Facebook. She's like, I don't have Facebook.
Yeah,
I'm like,
I remember that. 'cause
Just
I-
kidding, right?
Your message. So what you're saying is you're messaging some random person.
Yeah,
on
I
Facebook.
mean, I don't know how I got that mixed up, Gariann Yochym. I mean, it's not.
I'm the one and only. I don't know. Maybe there's some impersonator out there. No.
Dude, these days there's no telling, man. There's no
Hey,
telling.
that's funny you say that because there's a girl. She's getting ready to be the second Caitlin Hope Ledford in Cherokee. That's no joke, but anyways.
What
That is
that?
why.
Is that,
Literally.
Literally, yeah.
is that intentional? You can't just tease me. with
Spelled
that.
exactly the same
Is that
way,
intentional, or is it like what's going on here?
too. No, I
Give the backstory right quick.
You can't
She-
tease me with something like that. And not.
How did we meet her? Just through Facebook and stuff. She
Mm-hmm.
follows us and whatnot, and then she come through the line at work one day, and I seen her credit card thing, and it was spelled. I knew her name was Caitlin Sides, and her name was spelled exactly like mine, and that's what drew me. I seen it because it's very, that's not common.
Not traditional.
Right, it's not a traditional way to spell Caitlin. And then I seen out beside it said Caitlin H. And she's dating my cousin, Calvin Ledford. And I was like, if you guys get married, we're going to have the same exact initials. And then as she was getting ready to leave, I said, oh, yeah, by the way, what's your middle name?
No way.
And she said Hope. And I was like, blew my mind. I was like, what?
She came
And
home
then
to tell me that.
this past weekend, he proposed to her. So they're going to get married. So she's going to be a Ledford.
Who's
That's
getting
wild.
Who's getting married first?
I don't know.
Because
I haven't asked her.
you're gonna be a McCoy.
It's the waiting grace. No, I don't know. Oh yeah, then her name will change. So.
Race to the
So
altar.
like
Won't be for long.
you're essentially passing the torch to her because
I'm gonna tell her she better start running.
yeah, you're becoming
Hold
a McCoy.
up the name.
I'm sure that this conversation is something that isn't foreign to the reservation. These names changing, things like that, like Ledford, becoming McCoys,
Right.
these people coming.
Well,
up.
we're actually kin on. It's weird. Like, how does that happen?
Marriage. Hold
Yeah.
on. You
No,
just
no,
made that
not
sound
like-
terrible.
not
nothing like putting you on the spot now. So Gariann Yochym,
Thank you, Rob.
tell us about. Let's introduce you. Tell us about what you do. Tell us about why I was interested in having you on this podcast. Like, what is it that you do on a daily basis? What is your job? What is your title? Give us a little introduction.
So I am a case manager, and I'm employed by the North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition.
Awesome organization,
Yes.
doing fabulous work all across the state.
And it is an honor to work for them. And we are in partnership with the Waynesville Police Department. The assistant district attorneys, well, actually, the district attorney had to approve of our program and our eligibility and the charge diversions, for which we will forego arrest. We are in partnership with Meridian Behavioral Health and Appalachian Community Services at the Balsam Center, and then some folks over on Russ Avenue in Waynesville. And so essentially LEAD is an acronym for Law Enforcement Assisted Diversion, and it is a pre-arrest diversion program where at the point of probable cause for an arrest, a law enforcement officer at his or their discretion has an opportunity to divert a person from the criminal justice system from arrest if they come to discover that the person has some unmet behavioral health needs that are likely driving the criminal behavior. And so they do a warm handoff if it's between Monday through Friday, or if it's Monday through Friday between the hours of 9 and 5. That person will come to me, or if I'm in a meeting or working with another participant and I'm not able to meet with that person immediately, then Meridian Behavioral Health Services, they will step in and help out and do a screening and assess for safety and crisis, that sort of thing. And then on nights and weekends, the Balsam Center has agreed to accept the warm handoff there. So that's the biggest piece of the program. And there's also a social referral that officers can make. And so right now we've had 9 referrals so far, and 8 of those have been social referrals. So this is a very clear indication that officers know their community. So in Waynesville, you know, when they're out there patrolling on their shift and they see some familiar faces and they get to know some of the ways and means of individuals and their whereabouts, and if they start to form a relationship with that person and they learn some things about that person and they think that that person needs some help, they can make a referral, and there doesn't have to be a criminal charge that's being diverted at that point.
And living where we live, that's most likely a very common event that takes place, where we get to know people, right? You walk in the grocery store, you recognize your neighbors, you recognize your folks. They build relationships with each other.
Yes.
Um,
And so in the interest of prevention, that's where that piece comes in. And the community can also make social referrals.
Can they now?
Yes.
Okay.
So if there's somebody out there in the community who knows someone who's struggling, and either they are at risk of getting involved in the justice system or they have a history of cycling in and out of that system, they can call Detective Paige Shell or Lieutenant Tyler Trantham. And I'll just go ahead and say the phone number, 828-456-5363. And they can make the referral.
Yeah.
Of course, that community member, as well as the law enforcement officer, would want to ensure that there's no coercion involved and that the person is open to getting some supportive and intensive case management.
How long has LEAD been up and running, and can you have any data, like how effective it's been? Like,
I don't have a lot of data yet, and we launched in mid-June, and so, it takes a lot of time to launch a program like this, and to ensure that there's officer buy-in, to ensure there's community buy-in, to ensure that potential participants
How's that been going?
have bought in. I mean, I think we're off to a great start, and quite frankly, I don't think that we need to have anybody want to try to come and evaluate the program in a year's time or 6 months' time. As I think it's going to take a lot of time. And as a firm believer that change is not an event, it is a process.
Right.
I want to ensure that we are actually giving folks an opportunity to make some changes. So getting back to your question with buy-in, I have, my office is currently at the Waynesville Police Department, and that's given me an opportunity to get to know a lot of the officers. I've done 4 ride-alongs, and those ride-alongs are really important because it helps me to understand their work, and it helps me to get to know them as human beings, as professionals. We generally go out and eat a meal at some point during the ride-along, and I'm also a firm believer in breaking bread with people, and that's a beautiful way to build relationships and trust, and I've been really prioritizing that, and it takes a long time to build relationships and trust, but I feel like that, we're making that headway, and I mean, I'm in there every day, and I know about people's children, and I know how people are spending their holidays, and I know what music folks are listening to. I feel like music is another like universal language where you can connect with people, and so getting to know officers in a more personal way. And I've been fortunate to be able to go to several different events with Detective Shell. She's been great at inviting me to accompany her. There was a big national night out in Canton, and I got to meet law enforcement officers from all over the county, emergency medical service providers from all over the county. And just to have that presence so that this partnership has been forged and that it's meaningful is really important. And Paige has invited me to a lot of different community collaborative meetings. And then last month I traveled with Chief Hollingshead and Paige across the state to Raleigh to a diversion summit, and there were 80-some different professionals. Several of them were law enforcement officers in the room, and we talked about different programs throughout the state, diversion programs. And so this is getting lengthy, but that's, a lot of the buy-in around law enforcement. With the community buy-in, I have since, I think I started April 2nd was my first day on the job. And I was doing some training, and I was going to other parts of the state to get to know my colleagues at NCRAW, and then didn't actually arrive in Waynesville to start working there and get my office set up until later in the month. But I was actually traveling to Waynesville about mid-April, reaching out to Pathways Center, the Open Door, Haywood Christian Ministries, just any provider in the community who I envisioned being a critical part, a key stakeholder in the success of this program. And so really just, I have a little bit of background in doing some community organizing and how to build that capacity and build that buy-in. So I used some of that skill set and just started cold calling people. And I am a member of the Substance Use Prevention Alliance and Healthy Haywood. Both of those operate out of the Haywood County Health Department, and I meet with a multitude of stakeholders from across the county and across systems, and we're coming together once a month to talk about the issues that are so complex that folks are facing in Haywood County and arguably across the nation. And then I'm a part of another community collaborative group, and we focus on economic issues, issues around poverty and employment and housing and transportation. So I've been really fortunate to kind of get in where I fit in Haywood County. And it's been easy. I've just been met with so much hospitality and warmth, and just people really ready to get in front of the issues that folks are facing. And then with participant buy-in, that can be a little tricky because there's lots of folks who have a history of trauma, of stress around law enforcement and their involvement in the criminal justice system. And my role has a few times been conflated with law enforcement. And part of that is, I'm operating out of the PD. Eventually I'll be operating out of Meridian. There's some kind of kinks getting worked out in the lease and the insurance and all that. We have some liability insurance I guess we need to get. I'm like, well, this ain't the first time I've been called a liability.
Don't
No,
worry.
There's my little silly joke, but
Don't
no,
worry.
so
We'll
we're-
get there tonight. Don't worry.
So we're working those things out, but I mean that in no way to say that I'm ungrateful or anything. I've been so grateful for the opportunity to operate out of the PD, and it's just, I really believe that it's been critical to the strength of this program and the sustainability of it. But I just work, on an individual basis to really try to build that trust and that connection with folks. And, as you guys know, I was nervous to come on here. My gift is, I think, one of my gifts is just one-on-one connection with people and being able to relate and identify with people and understand where folks are coming from and then to deliver on things. If I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to do everything in my power to get it done. If I say I'm going to be somewhere to meet someone, I'm going to be there to meet them and to approach people in an unconditional way and in a positive regard, and to not sit in a place of judgment of anybody's life. I'm not here to put anyone's life on trial, and I'm just here to say, what can I do to be a support person, in your life? And I hope that that resonates with people, and that no matter how close my role is to law enforcement officers, that they see that as a strength and as an opportunity to make changes in their life, not as a hindrance or not as a barrier to getting some access to resources. So it'll take a little time, I'm sure. And I've got a couple folks who've just said, I don't want to be a part of LEAD because, law enforcement. And then we talk on the phone all the time. I'm like helping this one woman get housing. And that's the beauty of the work I'm doing, is that even if they don't want to be a part of LEAD, I can still provide harm reduction services, and I can still be a support person in their lives. And I love that flexibility because I don't have to say no to anyone or deny services or help or support to anyone. So that feels really good.
In these
Long answer.
in these recovery circles, you hear like a lot of these catchwords, these buzzwords. And one of them, one thing that you hear is meeting people where they're at. Everybody tends to gravitate towards that. And, I'm a realist, man, and, I tend to do things in a non-traditional way. But looking at the way that many of these organizations who claim to be doing that conduct business, they're not actually doing that. Whereas what you are doing is you are actually meeting people where they are at. You are knocking on doors. You're going into wherever and doing exactly what you just said, and offering harm reduction services or offering just care and love and anything that you can possibly do. That's like the beauty of your job, is like that gives you that ability to do that. And not many organizations can do that right now. Hopefully that will change in the near future through the work that you guys are doing and through the work that the Harm Reduction Coalition's doing and many others. The law enforcement diversion is not a new concept, so to speak. However, you guys are the first rural community to house a law enforcement diversion program. How did that come to life in Waynesville?
And I'm very proud of that.
Yeah.
So I want to say one thing before I answer that question, just to expand on meeting people where they're at. I want to take that a step further and say that I accept people where they're at. So I'm going to meet them where they're at geographically, meet them where they're at in their, wherever they're at in their relationship to substances and or recovery, and then just accept them for wherever they're at. So in answer to your question, there are a lot of different diversion programs, and they're starting to rename them as deflection. So I'm trying to adapt to this word change, but either way, the very first one that came to my knowledge that actually is under the LEAD brand, the very first LEAD program, came out of Seattle in 2011. And I'm sure you guys probably followed some of that work, you know, after years of community outrage, quite frankly, at the ways in which drug laws were being enforced. And then there were also a lot of law enforcement officers and the district attorney who just found themselves very frustrated with the ways in which drug policy was being enforced. They came together, and it was an unlikely team of people coming together. Historically unlikely, and they developed LEAD, and then after a few years, after its launch, it was replicated in Santa Fe, and then Albany, New York, is my understanding, they were the first on the East Coast to get a LEAD program. And then probably right around the time that Albany had launched, there's a program in Nashville, North Carolina, under Chief Tom Bashore, and it's called the HOPE Initiative, and that's essentially where somebody can enter the police department no matter what substances and or paraphernalia they may have on them, turn in their substances and or paraphernalia and ask for help. No questions will be asked, and law enforcement officers will help get them connected to treatment. So that was launched in Nashville.
Was that effective?
That's what I was going to say. How many people actually walked up in there and was like, okay, I'm done. Here you go. I mean, and I hate to say it like that.
You know, and I had the honor of sitting next to him in Raleigh last month on a panel, and he's an incredible guy, total leader. And I forget what he said, but I want to say within a matter of days he got his first phone call.
Oh,
and I think that the first one, he went out to the home, and then eventually, and I believe that they will do that as well. So you can call as well.
Right.
And I hope I'm not misspeaking on the kind of fundamentals of that program, but that's pretty much what my tiny brain remembers from last month. But so that was, in my understanding, that was the first kind of diversion program in this state where law enforcement officers were connecting people to services and resources. And then eventually the state had allocated some money for a pilot program in Fayetteville. And all the while I've been watching LEAD just get replicated in all these jurisdictions across the country, and I really wanted to be a part of a program
this
like
was
that.
on. We'll get into like a little bit of your story, but this was on your radar while all this was taking place.
Yes, it was on my radar, and I remember seeing a posting for a position in Fayetteville, and I thought, oh no, you're not going to leave Asheville. No offense to Fayetteville, but it just wasn't really where I saw, you know, my trajectory in my life going, because, and I'll get into this later, but I want land, I want farmland, and so I'm like, I don't think I'm going to have that in Fayetteville, North Carolina. So I just kept hoping that a program closer to my current home would be developed. And I think right around that time, the state had identified a more urban community like Fayetteville and a rural community like Waynesville. And there was leadership in both of those law enforcement agencies. And I don't know if anyone here at the table knows Chief Bill Hollingshead, but that man is amazing. He is one of my heroes, and it's such an honor to work with him, to have gotten to know him, and he's been a leader across the state, and he sits on, gosh, that man's bio, it's off the charts. He's just got so many different things that he chair, all these committees he chairs and all these things. And so I think the state was recognizing his leadership as well as Lars Paul's, I think that's his name, the guy out in Fayetteville, the law enforcement officer out there. I think he's a captain. Both of those men exhibited all this leadership, and so then I think they wanted to try to pilot a program in an urban and in a rural community. And then Detective Paige Schell, who, let me shout out to her, is also an amazing woman and leader. She had learned about the LEAD program and really was interested in it and wanted to be kind of the key coordinator at the department to head it up, if you will. So they sent her out to Seattle, and she got to shadow the program out there. And then for over a year before my job was ever even posted, before I ever hit send on my resume, people had been coming together. And I learned the other day when I met with Lori Clancy that she had been at that table and had been talking about the logistics of the program and how it might work in a small town that doesn't have public transportation. And, you know, we're very fortunate to have some resources, but we don't have the same amount of resources that, you know, Fayetteville or Wilmington has or Charlotte has. And
just Asheville down the road.
Yeah, or Asheville. Yeah. So, so folks were coming together to try to sort out the logistics long before my position was ever posted. And, yeah, I got to give them credit. So I hope that answers your question. And, you know, with the North Carolina Harm Reduction Coalition, and they recognize that is part of our work to involve ourselves in anything that's going to reduce harm. And so I think all of us at this table are pretty aware of the collateral consequences that people face when they get caught up in the system. You know, it's really easy to get caught up in the system, and it's really hard to get out. And so
our tribal judicial system, we had some prosecutors go out there, some judges go out there and check out the LEAD program in Seattle a few years ago. And our chief come up to a community club meeting months ago and shared our budget. We have right around 10,000 people living on the reservation, and we have just as big a budget as Asheville has. We have that much money coming in, but yet we can't get them to buy into that. And we talked to a tribal prosecutor the other day, and he said the turnover rate in the officers, law enforcement officers, is just outrageous right now. I had 2 people quit the other day because of everything that they're seeing, like with the substance use and everything. So I hope something like that happens on the reservation, and I definitely gave you a plug the other day talking to the chief.
I mean, it's so hard, you know, especially like just getting people in recovery and being around, you know, the law enforcement. I mean, I'm not going to say there's not people that want the change and want to see all this, but then there's also, you know, just getting in the jails and stuff like that, period. It's tough.
Yeah.
That's
Definitely.
why I really liked how you was talking about you make those individual connections with people, because that's where it's at. It's building trust. I mean, we just gave somebody a ride, and we're both in recovery, and a lot of people, but that don't mean anything. That don't mean automatic they're going to come off and trust you. You know, like they were very resistant, were they not? And we were. Talking. That's why we were a little bit late, because we, you know, wanted to give her a ride. It's cold outside, but you know, just. You got to make that effort. You know, you got to show people that you care by making those individual connections, building that trust.
Yeah. Your word is your bond. Deliver on it.
And also, like, when you go and make that introduction, right, that first introduction, you don't, hey, I'm Gariann Yochym. I'm with the
right,
Waynesville Police Department.
Yeah,
hey, the Waynesville Police Department sent me over here to make sure you're doing all right. You know, like, I'm sure that knowing you the way that I have come to know you, I know that, like, it's easy. You said it at the beginning of the show that you feel like one of your strengths is building relationships. And it's clear that it is because of what's happened here, because of the people who you interact with and meet with on a regular basis. How did you get to the point, like being on the lead program being on your radar and you kind of envisioning pursuing that as a career, how did you get to that point in your life where that was something that you were passionate about to the point where you would pursue applying for a job like that?
Yeah.
And up for the challenge, a new program in a new city, like that shows commitment, that shows dedication, that shows that you're in it for the right reason and
Recovery champion.
Passionate about something. You're not going to commit and push for something like that if you're, that's not where your heart's at.
Mm-hmm.
Where's your heart at, Gariann? Yochym?
It's right here.
I see it.
So how much time do we have? Because this could be a really lengthy...
There is no clock here.
Okay. This could be a lengthy response, but I'm trying to think how far back to go. But I guess
what I was getting at is that, like, social work, that sort of thing, wasn't really your initial...
Sure.
And another thing too is, like, where was you born and raised? I think that's very significant too.
You want me to start? I'll start there.
Okay.
So I was born, raised, cultured, and educated in West Virginia. Grew up on a...
What's so funny about that, man?
I don't know. Gariann, I don't know. I just don't think you look like or act like you're from West Virginia.
A nice, pretty girl from West Virginia. You never seen one before?
Shoot, I'm a country girl. I'm not too far off that farm. Don't be fooled. I promise you. I didn't wear my Carhartts tonight.
We'll get there.
It's not cold enough yet for all that.
It will be when you leave this room, I promise you.
No. So, yeah, I grew up on a small farm in West Virginia, and there's a lot of beauty in my childhood, but there was a lot of dysfunction. My dad died tragically and unexpectedly when I was 4. He was a coal miner. He died in a mining accident. And then not long after that, my mom started seeing someone, and then she moved him in, and he definitely had an alcohol use disorder, and he was verbally abusive, physically abusive, and so I had to be tough from a young age, really tough. And I got into high school. I'm kind of skipping a couple things here, but when I entered high school, I entered with a 4.0 GPA. They had this thing where you could letter in academics when we were in middle school. It was cute. I got a little letter. Anyway, for a jacket that I didn't own, like a letterman's jacket kind of thing. Letter persons, I should say. That's better. Played sports, ran track, played basketball. Decided I was going to try out for cheerleading. I don't know why, because I was not peppy like that, but I did. And, was on student council, started off strong, and then by towards the end of my 9th grade year, and then that summer, I started slipping up, and no one in my family ever used the words coping skills. It was not a part of our vernacular, and I found myself coping through with substances. And by 10th grade, I had quit all my sports and was sleeping through most of my classes, and my grades had dropped. And then, it just got worse. And no teacher ever woke me up. In fact, there were times where I would sleep through the bell and I'd wake up and be all disoriented, and there'd be another class in there with me, and I'm like, oh my goodness. No one ever asked what was going on, and my mom was pretty involved in the school. She used to work the concession stand at the games and stuff, but there were a lot of things going on in my household that the teachers didn't know about, and I don't think we had a social worker at my school. We had a couple guidance counselors who I found to be pretty intimidating. I wasn't going to them for any guidance, but anyhow. And then
So that made an impact on you, though.
It
Sleeping
did.
and nobody.
It really did. It was a catalyst for me. You know, of course, in that moment, I wasn't realizing all of that. But sometimes we can be impacted and influenced by the negative things or by, you know, the lack thereof. But so the end of my junior year, my mom was diagnosed with breast cancer, and she died 6 months later. So it was very fast and aggressive, and I was not doing well, and started my senior year off. My mom was hospitalized, and I was really struggling with all that. And after she died, I didn't have any support either. And I remember I took like a week off from school, and I came back, and it was like none of my teachers wanted to know how I was doing. No one. It was just like, well, here's what you missed. I mean, I remember physically like getting a stack of missed assignments to do, and there was no like very little compassion. And I got into some trouble, and I was on probation, and then I was living on my own because I wasn't going to live with my mom's boyfriend in the house. His drinking was just really problematic, and so I was on my own and just reckless and incredibly vulnerable, and everybody around me was using something, and I made a very narrow escape from a lot of that, from that lifestyle. After a few months of living on my own, and I was really struggling and not going to school, and my grandmother, who I want to say she was the first harm reductionist in my life, she just said, move in with me, no conditions. I've got my basement. There's a separate door. You can come and go as you please. I just want to know that you're here and that you're eating and you're sleeping. You won't have a curfew. And I mean, by her saying those things to me, I wanted to have a curfew. I wanted to respect her. And so I did. And I made some changes. And, you know, I had, in addition to my grandmother, I did have a lot of supportive friends. I mean, I had a lot of people who I was out there being reckless with. But ultimately, I mean, I can go back at that point in my life, and I can think of some really pivotal moments and some pivotal conversations from friends, from a couple other family members, in addition to my grandmother, and also my probation officer, who I have looked for, and I've never been able to find her. I'll just say her name, Officer Stacy Claxton.
Officer Stacy Claxton.
If you are out there, no, it's hard to tell. I mean, that point in my life, everybody just looked old. So but she didn't. I mean, she might have been like in her 20s or 30s, but you know, I was young and
Well, another
you know,
thing
but
too
I mean,
is
she could have gotten married. That could have been a married name, and maybe, you know, it's hard to tell. But
this is ground zero of the opioid epidemic, right? I mean,
this is yes. And so when I say I made a narrow escape, I tried OxyContin. I mean, I can tell you exactly when OxyContin debuted in my hometown because I knew everybody who was dealing. I knew when indictments were coming out. I knew what was happening in my hometown. And so here's this new pill. And I didn't know the difference between a benzodiazepine or an opiate. I knew what a stimulant was. I knew the different effects, but I didn't always know what it was I was taking, and it made me very sick. And I remember my friend saying, if you just take it a couple more times, you'll get past all that. And I did, but I never got past that sickness, and I'm very grateful for that. I mean, we're never fully out of the woods because we're only human, and, you know, I never want to say I'm above anything. I don't know what my future holds, but I know in that moment, had a few variables been different, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be the lead case manager. I wouldn't be here having this conversation with you all, and I may not even be alive. Because 6 months after that drug came into my circle of friends, I've got my first friend in the ground. And I have since lost 20 friends. And I don't think I knew at that point in my life that I would end up working in this field and in this capacity, but I knew that I wanted to do something in the service of other people. And I think somewhere inside of me, there's this really strong proclivity for justice. I want justice. I want fairness. I want equity for people. And I've always felt that. I mean, I can go back to memories of being a little kid and hearing about the suffering of indigenous peoples and hearing about the suffering of people of color and, you know, poverty, and just always feeling all that in some kind of cosmic way, and just wanting to do right by people. And, you know, Maya Angelou said, when you learn, you teach, when you get, you give. And I felt like I had something to give. I don't know. So I decided it was either between being a social worker or a high school teacher. I really wanted to work with adolescents because I felt like that was the place where everything was starting to unravel for me. And maybe had I just had the right folks at the right time. I mean, I eventually did, but there were a lot of years that were really messy for me. And
like be that person who didn't see you when these things happened to you. Be that
you
person
wanted to be that person
that could step in and say, hey, what's going on? How can I help?
Yes, I crave that. And
Can I make this point? Like you said, you're from, was it a small school?
It was. I think there were about 200 people in my graduating class, so not as small
so
as
it
maybe
shouldn't.
like a
You
school.
would think that they would have, you know, been more compassionate or show, you know, been like, oh wow, Gariann wasn't at school today for a week, and you know, pressed in, or you know, asked you at least, hey, is everything okay? And when it's a smaller school, it makes it that much more monumental on, you know, to think back on and reflect on and stuff.
And I'm with you on that.
And you do have something to give. I think that, you know, you saying that, you know, had different circumstances, you know, if things had been different, then you wouldn't be here. But just for the way that I think everything happened the way it's supposed to, and that you're exactly where you're supposed to be, because you do have something to give others.
You'll make me cry. Thank you. So I'll just try to giggle through all that. But yeah, I really felt like, you know, here's this young girl who enters high school with this GPA, and she's involved in things, and within a year's time, she's sleeping through every class, and no one ever asked what's going on. And you know, I want to. I don't want to sound like I've got this, like I'm harboring all this resentment towards those teachers, and I did for a long time. I mean, I was really angry that, you know, that the adults in my life didn't act like the adults that I needed at that point. And so I just made a commitment to myself and to any adolescent that I could have the opportunity and the honor to work with, that I was going to do things totally different. And I did. And I, for better or for worse, and whether my students loved me or despised me in some of those moments, nobody slept in my classroom. Nobody. And if they fell asleep, if they attempted to, I'd say, I need to speak with you for a few minutes after class. And then I inquired. You know, I wanted to know them. Teach the whole child, not just the subject. And it was imperative for me to understand what social issues they were bringing into my classroom. And I had a lot of students who were, economically disadvantaged, and I had students with ankle bracelets on, and I had a couple of students, 2 of them, after a year that they were in my class, one of them, he was tried as an adult for armed robbery. Oh my gosh, and it broke my heart. And I had what I thought was a really special connection with him, and he just shined in my classroom, but he got caught up in some stuff beyond the walls of that school that were just out of my control and arguably out of his. But
what would it look like? I'm sorry, I'm just imagining things in my head. What would it look like, if you had that teacher that when you was going through that time of crisis situations, and when your life is just, you're messing up, if you had that teacher that cared and showed up to your court date and was like, because evidently something's going on.
And I did do that, and I wrote the letters.
That's awesome.
And
Let's make a movie.
Yeah.
Sounds like a movie.
I want to say
did everything
something.
in my power to be there for them, but
Gariann, I want to say something. I'm a firm believer in levels, right? And so you're going through this season of teaching these kids and everything, and I feel like, I'm a believer, so I feel like God was preparing you for the next level, this next season that you're in your life, working with people that struggle with substance use and mental health issues, and a lot of times whenever we, it's a known fact, whenever we start using that drug, that's the mindset that we stay in. So it's like you're dealing with kids of that age again, you know what I mean? It's like he was preparing you for exactly the job that you're in right now. That's what I feel like I need to tell you that.
yeah, I see that connection for sure. So and I did that for 8 years, and my last 2 years I was department chair, and it was a great opportunity, but I do not see myself in a supervisory role. That's not my strength. My sister is a principal, very proud of her, and that's her game. But I saw it as an opportunity to hopefully influence the teachers on my team, not to be there in a punitive way, but to influence them in a positive way and inspire them and talk to them about teaching and learning and building relationships with kids. And when I went in to observe a teacher, if there was a child sleeping in there, I'd be like on fire. But I'd have to sit there through it, and just because when you observe, you're supposed to be kind of invisible in that classroom, but
Just that.
But
the
you're
silent
there.
You
observer.
could probably
everyone
see-
knows you're
you
there.
could probably see steam coming out of my ears, because I just was like, how can this teacher, this adult, stand up there and see this kid sleeping? And I don't know. So that would frustrate me, but
It takes a special
almost like-
person. It takes a special person to connect with young people in an English class, right? Like to be able to
Oh, you was English teacher?
She was an English teacher.
Okay.
to be an English teacher and to be able to prepare and deliver that material in a way that's receptive to young folks, right? Like when I was in high school, I was that kid that was sleeping if I was there. You know what I mean? And like just because like I just didn't connect with adults. Like I didn't want to, even though I wanted to live like an adult and make my own choices, I didn't listen to what they had to say. So it would have taken a very special person to deliver the material in a way that I could receive it, right? And be able to make that connection. What led up to you leaving and pursuing a different career path?
So policy ultimately is what drove me out of the classroom. And I had a really hard time seeing how I could still close my door and teach in a way that allowed critical thought and creativity to flourish in my room, because the district I was teaching in was moving towards a pay-for-performance model where the teacher's pay would be based primarily on the test scores.
And what year was this?
This was in 2012. I decided to...
That's a model that's kind of rolled out nationwide.
It has,
almost.
and it's not been successful.
So
and
I've
I got
heard, yeah.
really politically involved, and and at the time, my sister was like, "I'm glad we have different last names."
No,
Because-
it
He's
got
out there on the picket line or something.
well, and I would go down to county commission and the board of education, and just I tried to formulate a coalition of teachers, parents, and community members and stakeholders and students, and it was called Action for Education. And we did a lot of organizing around those policies, and we really tried to be that resistance and to push back. But we were up against a beast, probably now it's a multi-billion-dollar beast. I know for sure it was a multi-million-dollar beast at that point. And there were a lot of really powerful people like Bill and Melinda Gates were really pushing for this. And even artists like John Legend, and at one point Senator Cory Booker, who I'm a big fan of his, and he did a lot of direct action and community organizing when he was mayor. But I think a lot of people they were really misguided in what true teaching and learning was about, and it became this kind of business model. And to me, I just can't. There's just so many things that you cannot measure when you're talking about human relationships and teaching. I mean, when you're looking at a math problem, there's one right answer. There might be a couple different ways to get to that answer, but there's one right answer. When you're looking at a piece of literature and you want to tell a child that they need to think like a test maker, who is, in most cases, those questions are culturally biased. They're written from people of privilege, multiple privileges from their social identities. And so I just found myself ever more disheartened with the direction in which policy was going, and a lot of it was coming down from the federal government, and it didn't matter. These were bipartisan policies, so if there was anything at that point in time that the government was agreeing upon,
it's like the only thing.
it was the only thing. I mean, people were crossing the aisle, and I'm all for that. Like, I want that, I really do, but not
For the right reasons.
right, for the right reasons. And so things were just moving in a direction where I felt like many things, and some of those aren't always great qualities, but I think one thing for sure about me is I'm principled, and I cannot bend on something if I just can't get in line, if I don't believe in it. And so I stepped away, and my intention was to spend a year just trying to reassess and figure out what my place was going to be in education, if it was going to be in policy or doing, something else. And then I'd been doing a lot of different community organizing around a number of social issues, and I'd done some political organizing too. I had a couple friends run for office and people I believed in, and I helped work on their campaigns, and really just have always found myself really charged by a lot of social issues, particularly around injustices. And I said, well, maybe I'm going to go into social work. And so at this time, I was really charged up about the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, and just really devastated and feeling like I don't know what to do to help people, but it was really hard for me. And it felt like I would probably work with veterans or something. That seemed like the direction I was going to go. And let me back up, because I forgot to mention that I had applied to the MSW program at Western. And so I applied to that, and I found out I got in. And initially, I wasn't really sure what it was I was going to do with my social work degree. But I felt it was kind of funny how I'd come full circle. I had made a decision at a very important juncture in my life when I was 18 about, given of myself, and I was either going to be a teacher or a social worker, and I chose the one because I felt like I'm going to empower people in this classroom and help people transcend things. And then I ended up coming full circle and see myself as someone who can help empower people. But when I first got into the program, I wasn't sure what exactly I was going to do, but I thought for sure I'd probably work with veterans, not at the VA, but more in like a Wounded Warriors project or something a little more kind of on the outside of systems and pushing against systems that weren't really working for people or weren't as effective as they could be. So I don't want to be mistaken and say that the VA is not working, but I think help improve, yeah. And just really advocate for people. I really wanted to do that. Just seeing so many men and women coming back and just really struggling. And, you know, over 200,000 veterans are on our streets every night. And, gosh, it's just like rips my heart out. But so I know what breaks my heart. If I can be driven by that for better or for worse. So then I thought, well, maybe I'll be a school social worker. You know, that's kind of a natural fit for me. And then I thought, no, you need to stay away from schools for a minute because you're just going to find yourself so frustrated at that policy. And so bit by bit, as I got into the coursework and really started to think about all the issues I care about and what is the one place where these things converge and really get amplified, and that is in the criminal justice system. And so I thought, that's what I want to do. And I interned at the Buncombe County Detention Facility, and I did a short internship also at Helpmate, which is a domestic violence agency in Asheville, because I really thought I was going to work with women who were involved in the criminal justice system, either girls or women. And you know, knowing that over 90%, and that's just what we know, that's what's reported of women caught up in that system, have a history of trauma and victimization. I thought, well, if you want to get some foundation, you better go work for a domestic violence agency and really try to get some understanding. And of course, I had my own personal experience with that in my family of origin, my home that I grew up in, but really wanted to know more about what that looked like for other people, and you know, just patriarchy on a larger scale, trying to understand all that. And then I, you know, when I was working at Buncombe County Detention Facility, I was working with more men than women, and I was like, why would you limit yourself? See, these headphones are
bothering you?
No, they're just falling off my little tiny head here.
You're doing a great job.
Tiny brain.
Gariann.
No, I just got to rail on myself. I'm good at self-deprecation.
We'll build you right back up.
Thank you. I already feel held up. But yes, I was working with folks there, and really felt like, don't limit yourself. And I really got interested in reentry work, and helped launch the Ban in the Box campaign. And there were some really key individuals who came in and helped make it successful. So I kind of did a little bit of the footwork in the beginning, and then I got my first job out of grad school and kind of disappeared for a little bit from that campaign, but then kind of showed up towards the end. And they were able to successfully get a public ordinance for the county and the city. So that's really good. And then I did some more reentry work once I got out of grad school, but it had a punitive aspect to it. I was having to conduct urinalysis and call probation and parole, and it just didn't feel right for me. And I recognize I really identified for a long time with harm reduction approaches, and I really recognized that being in the role that I was in just wasn't the best fit for me. And, you know, getting back to being principled, I was like, no, this isn't good for me. And So I left that role, and I really felt like I needed to take another step back for a minute and really just get right with myself. And I had made a lot of really big decisions in a short period of time. You know, leaving Charlotte, moving to Asheville, going to grad school, career change, all this stuff. And I was like, I love to travel. So I was like, I'm going to take some time. And I just did a self-imposed and proclaimed sabbatical.
That a girl.
And really got right with myself during that time, and really got some clarity around a lot of things, you know, just not just professionally, but personally. I mean, if I'm not good with myself and I'm not feeling whole and clear about things, then I can't do this work. So I did that.
Where'd you go?
Went and took care of
That's what I was
myself.
gonna say.
Where'd you go?
Oh, man, I'm so lucky to be able to do all these things. I went to Guatemala. One of my dear friends was living down there at the time. And so I spent some time down there visiting her, and got to do some volunteer work, too. I really wanted to have that at the center of my travels, too, to give back and not just be a hedonist.
What'd you do down there?
So I worked a little bit at an orphanage. Excuse me. And then left there, came back for like a month. Pardon me. Hope that didn't show up, but came back for like a month, and then I went off to Southeast Asia, and I went to Thailand, Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia.
What'd you do over there for
That's
service
so
work?
Yeah, dude.
awesome.
Yeah.
Oh, that's one of my dreams right there, is to be able
you
to do
gotta
things
do
like
it.
that.
Oh
You
yeah,
gotta
we've
do
already
it.
we start talking about Everest. That's already kind of planted there. We'll see how it
Oh,
goes.
and you guys will do it. You
Yeah.
both are so amazing. For
Well,
lack
thank
of
you, Gariann.
for lack of a
Oh,
better
why are you laughing
adjective.
at that? We don't
Um,
know.
Because she was timid with it. She wasn't coming strong.
No. I was
Dang.
She was timid. She was dancing around it.
no, that was called emphasis.
Okay.
There was a prolonged pause there
Okay.
for
Yeah, I
emphasis.
got it.
Dramatic
I got it.
for
Stephen.
Steven. What's that? West?
There's that West Virginia.
Uh-huh.
But
Service work. What'd you do
you've
over there?
got to do it. So I was at a lot of different social enterprises. I did more observing than like service work when I was over there, but I really felt that it was important to not just go over there and lay on these Thai and Vietnamese beaches, but to really learn about what people had been living through over there for decades. And when I was in Vietnam, I mean, it's just wild to be there, because I think
So cool.
in
I'm
America,
sorry.
no. And I was by myself too, so that added a whole other element
wow.
to this journey. And but I learned when I was over there that, you know, we call it the Vietnam War, and they call it the American War. So just changing one word, you know, really changes a lot about the impact of that war on the Vietnamese. And I found myself doing math, and I don't do math very.
The English
Yeah.
teacher.
Yeah, the whole time I was there, every time I would look in someone's eyes, and I'd wonder, were you a baby in somebody's arms during that war? Were you my age during that war? Who did you lose? What did you experience? How did this impact your attachment and your nervous system, the way it was wired, and your brain development? And I just found it really hard to not think about those things when I was over there. And then in Cambodia, there was a genocide in the 70s, and I don't know if it's the youngest country in the world, young in terms of the population, the people who are living there, but I would say it's probably one of the youngest. I was hard-pressed to find somebody who was my age And I did not see, the oldest person I saw the whole time I was in Cambodia was not until like the night before I left, or maybe 2 nights before I left. And she appeared to be in her 60s. So that was really wild.
Did you, whenever you went over there and you've seen all these places, you know, and just hearing you speak about how you try to relate and understand that, you know, the struggles that they went through, because a lot of people don't do that. You know, I don't do that a lot. I don't stop to think like, what's this person been through, or you know, what kind of trauma have they seen or experienced? But what is it like? Did anything stick in your spirit? Did anything impact you now, like transcend that you brought back home with you?
Oh goodness. I mean, all of that, you know, and then just really, I really want to live a life that is examined. I want to always be fine-tuning my life and myself. And I really thought about what are the ways in which I've been complicit in any of this suffering that people are enduring right now. You know, whether it's the clothes on my back that was made in a sweatshop by women and children, whether it's, I just think about those things. So just always try to be mindful, and even when something is so painful or hard to listen to, I try to sit with it. I feel like that is the very least I can do. I can't be everywhere in the world, and I can't always be given of myself, and I have to slow down and take care of myself sometimes. But I've been listening to this news program for about 15 years, almost every day of my life, and the only time I miss it is if I am traveling, and then I try to catch up on it because it's really informative. But they do, at the very beginning of the program, like 15 minutes of headlines, and there's always some really, really horrible things, and sometimes I just want to turn it off and turn on a fun song or something, and then I stop myself and just try to be present, and that's the least I can do for people. And I don't know if I answered your question about what I brought back, but I think those are some of the things I carried there with me, because I think those are just some of the way I move through the world, just really trying to be mindful of other people and their suffering, and yeah, whatever I can do to not be complicit in it.
We don't have, and we heard this sermon a few weeks ago about we have a waning pulse of empathy, you know, in society today. Like, we don't have people that stop to cry with you or to celebrate with you or to, you know what I mean? Like, that is something that's like an anomaly nowadays, and it's, you know, it's awesome to sit here and listen to that, Gariann.
I think, you know, in addition to that, I mean, I think we just largely, in a really massive way, we are spiritually devoid. You know, we are the most overweight, addicted, medicated, indebted cohort that the world has ever known. And that bothers me. That's the kind of stuff that keeps me up at night. I don't sleep well. But I want to know what is behind all that. Why all this pain? Why all this suffering? And what's driving all of those behaviors and all those things? And yeah.
No, go ahead.
So,
Caitlin's wanting to say something.
I don't know. I think I'm kind of veering off a little bit with your original question, but I hope
What do you think, Rob?
some of that made sense. Or yeah.
My experience tells me it's a lot fear-driven, you know, not being able to accept discomfort and not being able to live with kind of like learn to live, accept, tolerate the kind of cards that we are dealt with. Like you, all the things that you overcame, all of the challenges that you were met with. Through overcoming those challenges, it created that sense of like tolerance or strength that allowed you to meet the next challenge with like some compassion, right? And being able to accept the next challenge, kind of like create some momentum through overcoming these things, through the kind of childhood trauma that you described in high school, and losing your parents, and being a teacher and sitting in the classroom and seeing it, and just like overcoming those challenges, just continue to create that momentum that like, not only can I overcome these things, but I can like own it and do it well, do it with some compassion, do it with some love, and like be a leader in my community, teach people how to do this. It's not something that we're naturally born with. Our natural response to discomfort or pain is to resist it, run away, push it away, avoid it at all costs, right? Steve, the former drug and alcohol user, will gravitate to those pleasurable experiences and cling to them and hold on to them and avoid those painful ones at all costs. But guess what? Steve grows and Steve prospers through learning to meet those difficult times with some compassion. And it's not easy, but I can learn to tolerate that first. If I can tolerate the pain, then I can eventually learn to meet it with some compassion. I can eventually learn to forgive myself and not hold myself to such a high standard and have such high expectations. Like, it's okay. I'm okay with where I'm at.
Come on, brother.
You firing up that flame?
Yeah, man.
Like, it's okay. Like, I'm okay where I'm at right now. Like, the things that I'm doing is the best that I can, and that's okay. It's momentum, man. Like, I'm a firm believer in momentum and creating that momentum. I can control one thing. I can control my actions, right? That's where we come from in the world that we live in. That's karma. My karma is the intentions of my actions. I can control that. So that's like my momentum, right? The direction that my life is moving in. But then I put these people around me, cats like Caleb, right? People like yourself, right? And we can build that momentum at a higher rate, a higher volume, right? We can move that momentum faster. But it only takes like one day for me to wake up and be like, you know, Caleb wants me to go running today, but I'm just going to lay in bed because I think that's the best thing for me to do. And then you're like, kind of like, your momentum will slow down a little bit. And then it's easier to lay in bed again. And it's easier to lay in bed again. But when I have these people around me and I've created my own momentum, it allows me to like overcome those challenges. It allows me to not only overcome them, but like, in a sense, welcome them, right? Like, it's okay, right? I didn't do my homework today. And I walked into class and I was like, I didn't do my homework.
Oh, well, right?
Oh, well. You know, I had to work too much and had a lot of things. Didn't I? Hey, there's our camera girl right there, Tatiana. Shout out to Tatiana Vereen. She came in today to take some photos of us for our website. What's the Instagram, Tatiana, where people can see your photos? Tati's Vision. Tati's Vision Photography on Instagram. Go. She's like kind of like dabbling in the photography world, and she's taking some awesome shots. But I walked right into class and I was like, I owned it. I was like, yeah, I didn't do my homework. What's the worst that could happen? I didn't do it. It's a grade, bro. It ain't the end of my life. It ain't like in the grand scheme of the next, hopefully 40 years of my life. What's that? What does it mean? It don't mean nothing. It doesn't mean nothing. I did a lot of things happen this weekend. I worked all those holidays, right? Another like unfortunate circumstance came in like my personal life, something I had to deal with, some friends and family back home that I'll kind of touch on a little bit later. But I lost somebody that was very close to me, somebody that I loved. So like things happen. I walked into class. It was okay. I didn't do my homework.
You had homework over Thanksgiving break?
Yeah, I get it. What's up with that, huh? Look, they're both shaking their heads over there. Yeah, I don't know, you know. But it's just like, but to other people, to people who haven't trained their train their mind or train themselves to like accept those things, it could have been like a big deal to others. You know, people like hold themselves to like this, and I hold myself to a high standard, but people hold themselves to these high expectations, and like, if I fail, it's okay. Not meaning if I fail the class, but if I don't,
that'd be catastrophic, right?
if I fail the class, it's not okay. But if I don't like do my little things
Lori's
like that,
gonna be
it's
calling you
okay.
here in a little bit.
Lori Clancy, don't be dropping me any comments down there. I love you.
Well, I think something to add to that is, you know, just being gentle with yourself.
Yeah,
I mean, and it's hard. I think I didn't realize this about myself because I always thought that word perfectionism meant something that looked totally different than me. I mean, I'm a girl who, my hair's messy, my clothes are wrinkled. I'm, you know, I don't present in this physical way that says I'm really put together or, you know, rigid or anything. But some of the ideas about myself or the way I should be doing things or the person I should be, I really found myself getting caught up, and I still have those tendencies at times to be a perfectionist, and sometimes it transfers into my work, and it definitely did when I was a teacher, and you know, that's a recipe for burnout, and I'm not trying to go down that route. So I don't know if that is in keeping with what you were saying, but I kind of think I'm just learning to be more gentle with myself and just accept my shortcomings, and that not everything is going to be perfect. And like you said, in the grand scheme of my life, this is just but a little tiny dot on that timeline. So, not this moment here.
Are you just
This is
are
gonna
you
take
dogging
up,
NCRAW?
No,
Are you
no.
dogging our podcast?
No, you got me wrong. I mean, like, this isn't like
I know.
reference to the one assignment.
I got you.
did
I
say
got
that
you.
wrong.
No, you don't.
NCRAW is
I
going to
didn't
take
think you
up
did.
like
I didn't.
several feet on that
You've
timeline.
already been putting it. You're listening, and you know, you told us that you've been listening to it all the time at the house.
Yes.
And everything, so
I have listened to the first 17 episodes, and then I've bounced around a little bit
Yeah.
because I met Trevor, who was on the show a few
You met
weeks
Trevor?
ago.
Uh-huh.
I met Trevor actually a while back when he was interning, and I'm not sure if he's still at that
He is.
internship,
Yep.
but
Mhm.
at Mountain Projects. I met him there, and then saw him at the recovery rally, and then so I wanted to listen to a few minutes of his on my way out here today, and then I lost service. But I've kind of been bouncing around, and then I listened to a couple ladies today. I want to say they were episode 27, maybe.
It's hard to believe.
So I've kind of
There's-
bounced around.
yeah.
I wanted to hear Steve's story, but I've learned so much from this program already, and I've been able to use some of the information to help people I care about. You know, I care about a woman right now who her daughter's really struggling, and when I learned about the mother's program, Sherry, is that her name? She was on
Sherry
the program.
Barker.
Sherry Barker. I called Sunrise and found out the time
Okay.
of the meeting, and I let this friend of mine know. And I don't know, because I haven't seen her in about a week with the holidays and everything. I don't know if she ended up going to that meeting, but just having some takeaways like that. And of course, there's all kinds of really beautiful takeaways as well. And
I was just joking. You don't have to like.
I don't have to what?
You don't have to kiss
You
our
can
ass.
get
Hey.
NCRAW tatted on your arm if you
Yeah.
want. No.
I'll give you a sticker for the back of your car before you
I
leave
do want a
tonight.
sticker, and I want a Res Hope
we got them in the
muscle
vehicle.
shirt.
We got them.
Muscle
We got
shirt.
'em. Hey, we just celebrated. I just wanted to like, get this in here because we was talking about how many episodes a year.
Yeah.
The other day we had our first meeting.
Yeah. So a year ago, last week
Bromance.
was the first time that this bromance started here. The first time that we and Caleb sat down at a table to begin the conversation about doing a podcast.
I was scrolling through my phone yesterday. I think it was. Yeah, yesterday, looking at old pictures, and I was every now and then I'll stop on a picture and show Caleb and be like, "Remember this?"
Yeah.
But there was dang Rob. I was like, "Oh, the first time I met him," and I was looking at like, "Who's this white boy?"
At the bowling alley.
Oh yeah.
At the
So
bowling
she's
alley.
saying-
Hey, so they were at the bowling alley. I've told this story before on the podcast, but they're at the bowling alley, and I was trying to talk to Caleb. I had met him like the week before, and we planned the podcast, and I go rolling up into the bowling alley. I'm all jacked up. I'm excited to talk to him about it. This girl right here, Caitlin, she wouldn't even give me the time of day.
She was like that at that time.
She wouldn't even give me the time of day. Look at her.
Did you ask her
And
to
now
speak?
you're going to be in my wedding.
Now I'm gonna,
Don't you even
What?
about the last time you was in the wedding?
I know.
What?
He didn't show up. He's supposed to be a groomsman.
Yeah, that was on the podcast that I talked about. Yeah, so the last time I was invited to be a part of a wedding, I got arrested and didn't show up. So my best friend's
Nice.
anniversary date is also my clean day, my recovery date.
Oh,
Wow.
Yeah.
That is
interesting.
something.
Yeah. So now this is the second wedding the next wedding that I'll be a part of with my brother.
The next
Redemption.
wedding that I'm going to skip out
Redemption, I
on.
like it.
Yeah. So
Redeemer.
so you end up landing this gig, right?
Yes.
And it based off of what you've kind of told us tonight, like it's kind of like a lot of like your career has been like kind of like building up to this point, right?
Mhm.
Like
Yeah, I feel like a lot of things, and that's why I kind of got granular about my life there for a minute or several minutes, because I feel like a lot of things in my life, personally and then professionally, have prepared me for this work. And somebody said something to me a long time ago that always stuck with me. It's so simple. You know, I used to think about the things that happened to me. And then this person said, what if those things happened for you? And I thought, well, that's an interesting way of reframing that. You change one word and it changes the entire lens through which you see those things that have happened that were definitely challenging. I mean, I grieved for a long time over my mother's death, and there were times I didn't know how I was going to get through that. But I think about just the ways in which that experience just really broke me open, you know, and just kind of stripped me down to this like core level, and like, what am I going to do about this? And how can this terrible experience be of some use later in my life,
So
and
You're-
help
can-
me to help other people or
Can I-
something.
Can I just say something? One of the sayings I really love and I apply to my own life is, our trauma is our treasure. You know, that's what
Right.
drives me. Everything that I've been through, I make peace with that, you know, and I try to figure it out, try to chew on it, figure out how not, you know, if it's preventable. But that's what fuels my fire, and that's what makes me want to give back. Go ahead. Sorry, baby.
That is just what I was thinking about, you know, because you had said, you know, you want to know, like, what's causing this person to be overweight or to be turning to substances or to be doing the things that they're doing. And it's like, you know, what, like you just said, why is it happening to me? But why is it, or why can't it be something that's happening for me, to mold me, to teach me, to bring me through that pain, so to make me a stronger person? And, you know, when it's happening at that time, you know, just like you said, it's like, why are these things happening to me? And just going through that trauma, like with both your parents, you know? And it's like, it's one of those things where, I mean, it takes going through all that to truly, you know, be able to sit back and reflect on that and be like, okay, I had to go through those things to be who I am today. You know, it's not the situation that makes you who you are, but
That's how you deal with it.
right. And through spiritual eyes, you know, because that's what I was thinking about the whole time when she was talking about that. Is just that there is a purpose to it. There is a purpose to it, and whether that's to build you to be that influencer for other people to positive things, or to be, you know, that person to start a podcast to help people, or, you know, just the different roles and where we're all at. And that's what I was thinking about when y'all were like staring at me like you are now.
A little bit ago.
Like you are now.
Yeah, I do. I think if we really have an opportunity to examine the things that we've experienced or been through, that's happened to us or for us, and figure out a way to channel all that and use it for something good.
Yes.
Something better.
The hardest part.
Right. That's what I
Use
was
it as
trying
a
to get to.
catalyst.
Right.
The hardest part is to recognize it when it's happening.
Yeah.
And to be able to like see the value in it at that time, because it seems so unbearable, right?
Yeah.
And it just seems like I don't know how I'm going to get through this at that time. However, like looking back now, like those moments in my life where I was like, felt that, I don't know how I can get through that, are what has fostered the most growth in like immediate growth, like meaning like in a short period of time, like these little things that have happened. In a lot of mine like happened in early recovery. Like I wasn't using, I was going through the process. Some significant events happened to the point where I was like, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. But I turned back to like what worked for me in my recovery, my meditation practice and things like that. And then it just like, I turned into a new person because I used it to my advantage, kind of air quotes. Like it just, I don't know. It's like seeing the value in it at that time is so hard. It's so hard.
Well, thankfully for retrospection, we can use those experiences to embolden us when we are struggling in our current situations. It's easy to lose sight of that sometimes because you're in the thick of something. But then if you can remember, go back in your mind to a previous experience and the way you overcame something. And even if you didn't, you know, I didn't cope with my mother's death in a positive way. I mean, it was excruciating. That's the only word I know how to say. But I was a teenager. I only knew what I knew. I didn't come from a family that used, like I said, words like coping skills or even taught me what those things were really. So I just used what I knew, what I was observing. So anyway,
And I think
not to go back to that.
That goes for
but
probably all of us. Like it's just not something like that is talked about. It's a topic that's not talked about. Like where you come from, hey, get over it, Caleb. It's going to be okay. Life's going to be okay. You know, like you don't always get what you want. You know, those are the things that you hear. But what does that mean? How does that help me? Right? How do I believe that?
What would you say?
I would say, I don't know. I don't have any kids yet. But I don't know what I would say. I would say like, I don't know. I mean, it's very circumstantial, but I think that,
like when my aunt died, you know, I took and I told Caitlin this on the road. I could just let it destroy me, or I took it as an opportunity to be that leader that I strive to be for my family, and to show them how to handle things differently, you know, in a healthy manner. So I just ran for 9 days straight. But yeah,
suffer.
Yeah.
If I'm going to suffer, I'm going to suffer.
Right.
I'm going to suffer the way that Caleb McCoy knows how to suffer.
Yeah. And I think a lot of times it's easy for people to look at the current generation or to criticize people's parenting strategies, but I'm really inspired by so many things with young people, and I'm inspired by several different parenting techniques that I've been able to observe in my friends and in my sisters. And one thing I keep coming across is like people talk to their kids a lot of times about emotional regulation and how to identify their emotions and how to regulate them. I mean, I can't speak for all parents, but I've been really fortunate to observe that, and I really see where that's a huge step forward, because those words, I didn't know. No one ever asked me
I've
really
never heard those words.
how I was feeling.
What is that?
How do you feel,
Or,
Kayla? Give me a feeling word. How do you feel?
Like
No.
people
Right.
weren't talking about that kind of stuff when I was growing up. No one in my family, my teachers weren't talking about it. And I think there's a push towards that. I mean, that's a good thing.
When you found out that you were going to be the case manager for the LEADS program, this grassroots program rolling out into the mountains of Western North Carolina, right? What did you do? Tell me what the first day on the job was like. Like, you got so many things going on, like it's all new. You have so many challenges, things to overcome, like, because it's more than just being a grassroots, like, new program. It's not just meeting those clients. You talked about building the relationships in the police department, but you're also building the relationships in the community with these resources that you're attempting to connect your clients with.
Yes.
So, like, what was that progression like for you? And, like, where did you start? How do you even know where to start, right?
Yeah, so my first day on the job was some paperwork, nothing too exciting.
Your social security card,
Yeah.
driver's license,
Blood type.
blood type.
So, kind of those formalities that one would expect when they first get on the job. And then we did a little bit of traveling across the state, went over to Wilmington, and we picked up a van load of naloxone and syringes and other equipment, and brought all that back to the west side to try to get everything set up for our mobile syringe access programs and for our overdose prevention work in the community. So we brought all that back, and then there was a harm reduction conference at Lake Junaluska, and
That's a national conference?
that was a southern one.
Southern, okay.
So but there were several hundred people there, and it was great. So many different tracks that you could take and different kind of panels you could go in and sit on or observe. I did a lot of observing that week, but so I went to that, and then I just started making cold calls, and first organization I called was the Open Door, and connected with Mindy Rathbone, who is such a beautiful human being, and she just kind of took me in under her wing, and she said, all right, we're going to focus on housing. I'm going to take you to the Southwestern Homeless Coalition meeting, and it's here in Silva.
Okay.
And so from that meeting, I met Destry Leger, who is getting ready to start a transitional house here in Jackson County. And I think part of her focus is going to be around the housing first model. So housing people where they are at, not where we want them to be, but really trying to build that capacity. And so met some of the folks around housing, and then went to the Pathway Center, I think the next day, Haywood Christian Ministries. And of course, I went and connected with Meridian Behavioral Health and ACS at the Balsam Center, because those are our key stakeholders in the LEAD program. So I wanted to get to know them. I had lunch with Paige and Chief maybe the second day on the job, and I hadn't yet met Lieutenant Tyler Trantham, who's also a key person in the Waynesville PD who helps with the program. And he's referred so many people, and that is a man who knows his community and is so respected in his community. I just got to say that. Now getting back on task. So that was kind of first couple weeks on the job, went to a forum at Haywood Community College, and it was an opioid forum. Then went to one in Asheville with the chief and Paige, and just really started to kind of get my finger on the pulse of the community and what the resources are. Went to NC Works, met with some of the employment specialists there. And I don't think I said this in the beginning, but our program is hinged upon Maslow's hierarchy of needs. So really trying to build up that capacity for folks, if they are open to making some changes in their lives, helping them to be able to do that. Because oftentimes we're forcing change on people when they're not ready, they're not willing, and they're most certainly not able to make those changes. So housing, food, shelter, safety, really trying to ensure that those things are in place, and then focusing on some of the other things later with the person. And I got my first client on June 11th, I believe it was. And this was after an overdose. And Lieutenant Trantham had actually seen the individual out in the community and asked the individual, and I'm trying not to use pronouns here, so forgive me if it becomes unwieldy when I narrate this, but asked the individual if they were interested in getting connected to some help. And so I was so excited to get my first participant, and went through the assessment process and then started working on meeting some of their needs right away, crisis needs, help the person get a food box, and just really trying to ensure safety, did some overdose prevention. And the person wasn't really aware of how powerful fentanyl is. And so we talked a lot about that. And
It's like an opportunity to educate.
to do education,
Mhm.
yeah,
And
which is a key
prevention.
piece of harm reduction. was
So
providing
that's
that.
what I wanted to ask. Is it more like harm reduction? Like, because I guess my question is if I say I was to become a participant,
Mhm.
right? And I mean, I guess there's guidelines, right?
Yes, so there's
Do you have to do,
eligibility
like,
criteria.
Drug testing
No.
and okay, so that was my question.
Mhm.
So you're truly like meeting them where they're at. Like, hey, I understand that you want to quit, but also understand it's hard and it's a struggle. But if you can, if we can get you off the streets, it raises the chances, right? Is that
Mhm.
where, I mean?
Well, and even saying, I understand you want to quit, a lot of folks, that's not where they're at. So when they are ambivalent, that's where we meet them with harm reduction.
Yeah.
That's the key
Right.
point for that to come in, and say, okay, I see you're still using. How can I help you use in the safest way possible? Can I help you get access to sterile syringes and equipment? Can I help you dispose of them properly? If you are, in a priority population would be somebody who is at risk of overdosing or witnessing an overdose. If the person is in that position, can I help train you on naloxone and teach you how to learn that, how to recognize an overdose, how to reverse an overdose? So really meeting that person where they're at. And we don't have sanctions in this program. We don't deny services. We don't charge anything. We don't coerce people.
That was my next question.
And this is a program and an approach that not everybody is on board with. And so this is not to criticize anybody for their own pathway, but
I just heard jaws hit the floor whenever you was like, how can we help you use in the safest way possible? Because, the people on Main Street don't understand that. And that's, like the community buy-in. That's the people that we need to get to.
I mean, what's the only requirement for recovery, people? You got to be alive.
Mm-hmm.
That's the only thing. It doesn't matter what. There's no other criteria that you have to have in place. Yes, we know that there's foundational stuff, and we want to help people find meaning and purpose and those things. But I want to keep
Can't
people
do
alive.
that if
You can't do that if they're dead.
That's
I'm
right.
just going to be
That's so
blunt and
true.
say that. So I'm in the business of health and safety and dignity for people. That's my focus. And so whatever I can do to mitigate any of these risks that you may encounter from using substances, mitigate any risks that you may encounter from engaging in sex work, mitigate any risk from engaging in any kind of what society would deem as high-risk behavior. So what can I do to help ensure your safety, enhance your life and well-being, and build a relationship with you, build trust. And if you, at some point, decide that you want to make some changes in your life, how can I help you do that?
Do you guys do like checks for Hep C and things like that?
Yeah,
and
so-
then, sorry. Go
Oh,
ahead.
no, you go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, and if you do, then and they show up positive, then are there steps that can be taken towards
Confirmatory
getting
testing and
treatment
treatment.
and
Yeah. So it's really tricky with Hep C. You know, we have some laws here in North Carolina that preclude people who are actively using from accessing treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand the spirit behind those laws is that this is very expensive treatment. We want to ensure that people are going to be compliant and adhere to the treatment protocol and follow through, and we want to ensure that the person doesn't, if they do go through the entire course of treatment, that they do not get reinfected and that sort of thing. So I recognize where people maybe at the table who were making those kind of decisions, I recognize where that comes from, but I also recognize human rights and access to things. And I mean, right now we've got a naloxone that's out there. It's called FZO, and they're selling that for $4,000 a pop. That's criminal to me. That's criminal to me. It costs 15 cents to make this stuff and just a few dollars to make that particular apparatus. It talks to you. It's an auto injector. And somebody is profiting off
That's
of that.
horseshit is what it
Yeah.
is.
So
It's horseshit.
it is. I mean, and it is. I will say it again. I cannot say it enough. It is criminal that somebody seeks to profit off of the suffering of other human beings. And I think, and I don't know how much it costs to make the medication for Hep C, but it's about $90,000 to go through a whole round of treatment.
It's very.
Why is it that expensive?
Yeah.
The same reason that
Right.
Yeah.
So I ask that more rhetorically. So
That kind of
we're going to
shit's been
withhold, we're
going
going to
on
judge the
forever.
worthy and the unworthy, who's
Yeah.
worthy of treatment, who isn't. I mean, and it's the same thing. I'm going to get on my soapbox for a minute, but it's the same thing with people. There's this whole attitude about, well, we should only administer naloxone 3 times, kind of a three
Right,
strikes and you're out.
Right. Yeah.
And, you know, I've heard people say things like, well, what if the EMS was responding to a service call related to an opioid overdose, but there's someone
a
over
cardiac-
here, you
so
know, and
hard-
it's just like,
yeah.
why are we going to say
Place
that one person
one
is
more
worthy
important.
and one person is not?
Right.
And I know that we're socialized, and that's a whole part, that's just one aspect of stigma. You know, even having that kind of thought about that is just one little piece of the way in which our language manifests into
Right.
our belief set and our actions. And people get really...
Why are you going to help
attached
the
to these-
addict over the non-addict? That's what it is.
And here's the
I
thing.
mean,
It's like you're going to put this person's life on trial because they used a substance to feel different and feel better, when maybe a person over here, I don't know. I'm getting on my soapbox here, but I hope that
We had a very interesting conversation about the per cap loans. Gariann.
we did.
I did. It was good.
We
It was a
did.
very good conversation. I don't know if you want to get into that, Gariann, but
Well,
so per cap's going to come up, and that's one of the reasons I brought it up. Per cap's coming out next Monday, and it's always a critical time for our people. The past couple years, we've had several people overdose and die, and so we was talking about how they do monthly increments of the per cap loans, and I told Gariann, I said, as a way to stop the overdoses during that time of the month, I think that you should have to pass a drug test, to which Gariann said,
No. Because are you going to go and look at what kind of spending they did?
Yeah.
Did they buy things that they needed or wanted with that money? And what's that about? What did they buy at the grocery
I know,
store?
right?
You know,
Right.
So
we going to go and look at
instead-
the groceries that you put in your cart with that per cap money? And there better not be anything in there with trans fat. Nothing deep fried.
Sugar?
Nothing with sugar. I mean,
not
and
going
I'm
to
not,
Sonic. So instead, how about instead of doing that, then why not having, if you take, I mean, when you come to pick up your per cap or whatever, have a big thing of Narcan kits, you
I'm
know,
with you.
distributing.
I mean, and
them.
this is systemic. We're not in this place because people have access to this per cap. We're in this place
Right.
because
Yeah.
of
The demand,
generational
yeah.
trauma, because of systemic issues and structural racism, structural classism. I mean, we didn't come to this place overnight, and we didn't come to this place because somebody gets a check once or twice a year.
She's right. She's
this
right.
is why she's going to be on the board.
Can
This is why I need liability insurance. No.
would you guys
but-
agree that she's comfortable now?
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
She's king back.
But, you know, and I'm not here to tell anybody what is best for their community, and I'm not here to tell anyone what's best for their life. But it doesn't.
It stopped me in my
don't-
tracks.
It doesn't mean I don't have
I mean, like-
opinions, or that I don't try to have my opinions rooted in evidence or rooted in pragmatism and things that are really impacting people who have been suffering for a really long time. And
So this is, I just wanted to throw this out just because we were talking about it, but I was told that you don't have to be clean. I mean, I don't know. You said there were laws, North Carolina laws about, you know, having to have sustained recovery time to get the Hep C treatment, but I was just recently told that you didn't have to, and that a lot of people don't know that. And there's a woman actually wanting to come and do a class with our Raise Hope people, which I haven't got to schedule that yet, which we need to, but she's wanting to come talk to people about that and let them know that I think it was like 6 months or something like that you had to have.
so there are laws on the books, but it doesn't mean that everyone is enforcing them. So there still is access to treatment, and there are Hep C peer bridgers in a number of different communities. I'm friends with a girl in Madison County who's one, and I can't speak for every treatment provider,
Right.
but
Okay,
I'm
yeah.
sure that there are some who have a zero tolerance policy, and it may just be from where they get their funding that would determine that. And then there are other treatment providers that are more accessible and don't have as many barriers
Right.
to access the treatment. So I hope if anyone tuned out that I can kind of retract that, not say that that's a blanket statement that you just can't access it at all. You can still access it, but I think it's important to understand that law is on the books in this state.
Right.
there's-
what's going on.
I mean,
yeah.
so, and we're not the only one. I think there's like probably 30 some different states. It's been a minute since I looked at that legislation. So, yeah, there's some advocacy work around that too. And I mean, and you know, the thing is like, if we think about, there's a lot of people who they really see syringe access as just enabling someone and just
right.
promoting it. But when we really think about the ripple effect of not having access to that, we in North Carolina, we have 5 counties that the CDC has identified as being at risk They're on a list of 220 counties in the entire United States. We got 5 in this state. We are at risk of an HIV and or hepatitis C or other hepatitis infections, viruses, very similar to what happened in Austin, Indiana, Scott County, Indiana in 2016, where they had an outbreak that nowhere in the United States had seen anything like that since the 90s. And part of it was it happened. Epidemiologists were able to go into that community and trace where the outbreak originated and how the disease spread. And it was through a group of IV drug users, and they didn't have access to sterile syringes. They didn't have access to health care. They didn't have access to getting tested on a regular basis. And so that's what harm reduction seeks to reduce, is when we start engaging with folks. I got trained early on to do rapid Hep C and HIV testing. And when we start engaging with folks, that's not going to be the first thing I say to them.
Yeah.
No way.
Right.
But I'm going to start building rapport with them,
Yeah.
and I'm going to help them access what they need. And if it's syringes, if that's what they need at that moment, then that's what they're going to get. If they need a winter jacket, then that's what I'm going to help them get. And then we can build this relationship, and then if and when they're ready, if they want to see, then we'll do that. And if they want a confirmatory, then we'll figure out a way to get somebody to the health department and do that too. But we've got 3 counties that are neighboring us. We've got Cherokee, Clay, and Graham. They're on that list. Burke County, it's what, 2 hours from here?
A little over, yeah.
And then surrounding us, we've got some counties in Tennessee, some counties in Georgia. And people are transient. And if somebody's going to a neighboring county to get something, to obtain a substance, and then they return to their county of origin or residence, I mean,
We've had several.
this is stuff we need to be talking about this.
Right.
And if somebody has an HIV diagnosis, it costs over their lifetime about $500,000 to treat them over a lifetime. And if they don't have insurance, and that becomes a ripple effect. And I don't really always like talking about fiscal responsibility, because that's not what drives me, but I recognize the importance in that. I mean, as a taxpayer, as a person who pays a premium every month, it's outrageous to have my health care coverage. And, I recognize that all those things end up rippling out into the community. And, you either want to sit over here and be attached to your ideologies, or open up and be open to some science, open to the empirical evidence. And there is a lot of it out there.
It's also a tough sell to some of these.
It is a tough sell, yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
good old boy
again,
network
Good old
that's been
boy.
going for, mean,
and I don't,
forever.
like I said, I don't want to come out and sound like I'm talking down
Yeah,
or say
at
what
all,
any
either.
community
You're
needs.
not.
But
You're not at all.
but you're totally onto something.
Yeah.
It's very clear that you are. But then again, like what I see is a lot of, specifically in the county that I reside in, which is not where this program is they talk the talk, right? They get it on the public platform, and they lead the general public to believe, I'm going to just say it, they lead the general public to believe that they are invested in addressing it the most appropriate way that we need to. However, their actions don't necessarily align with what they say.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't, how do you do that? You do that. How do we address that as a community? Well, we address it by doing stuff like what we do with this podcast. We address it by electing officials who will do something about it. But guess what? We've been doing this. We've been living in this community. I've been living in this community for 4 or 5 years. We've had 2 or 3 election cycles. And guess what? They're not the same cats are still the same cats are still in office. The same cats are getting reelected, right? So like, I don't know.
Did Doug Farmer get elected?
No.
Oh.
I don't know.
I don't know who that is, but
Yeah.
I suspect that was someone you had some faith in.
Yeah, so like, I mean, I don't know what the answers are, you know, and like
Yeah.
I've had conversations with people in local law enforcement in these counties, and they'll say one thing and tend to do another, and then there's implied barriers that aren't necessarily there, like. Instead of like, I'm the type of person, I'm trying to say this as delicately as
No,
possible.
I know.
I'm the
I
type
know.
of person that like when and I think we all are, when there is a barrier, when there is something that is preventing us from taking the most appropriate action, I immediately resort to finding a way around that, right?
Can I kick the door in? Right?
Can I kick the door in? Not just- but like, how do we address this?
Right.
How you know, we're it's in our DNA to solve problems, right? So like, I instantly like, it's how we function as human beings, right? But there's just like there's so much resistance. Like if we went down to the road here with some of these ideas that you're talking about, the conversation wouldn't go very far.
No.
Like they would tell us what we want to hear, but then when we move along, things wouldn't happen. And so like, how do we overcome that? Being the person who has been involved in like the political side of things, right? The educational and prevention side of things. What do? Pack my bags and move to Haywood County? I mean, what?
Do not run.
And don't, you know, like, if you don't, you're allowed, you can speak as freely as you want. Like, you don't have to answer that question. Like, I don't know.
I don't know if I can answer it, but I can say a few things about the process, and that it doesn't happen overnight. You know, if we are going to be true harm reductionists and say we meet people where they're at, we accept them where they're at, then that means I've got to do that for everybody, even people who I may not agree with.
Okay.
But really try and kind of brick by brick to build those relationships, to build that trust, to have those kind of hard conversations, and just recognizing that, again, getting back to change, it is not an event, it is a process. And, you know, the victories that NCHRC has been able to achieve did not happen overnight. They started as a very small grassroots organization, and I don't think they had any kind of funding to even pay themselves when they first started. It was all kind of underground, volunteering work. And then they've been able to build this capacity, and it's a beautiful thing. I mean, I wish I could say that that's in my history here with the nonprofit. I mean, you know, how's the saying go? Like, I come as one, but by way of many. And I'm here tonight just as one person, but all of this opportunity that I am so grateful and honored to have is because of so many people who fought these hard battles, hard-won victories, and they were able to get a standing order for naloxone. They were able to get syringe exchange program, and
The work
they were
that
able
was
to-
started before you
yes, they were
Mhm.
able to get a Good Samaritan law passed. And then Robert Childs and Tessie Castillo, they are some of the originals, and several other folks, they were able to go into South Carolina and Georgia and help them get some legislation passed. And, you know, NCHRC and the harm reduction community on a national level and arguably on an international level is kind of like a household name.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, gosh, I'm so proud to say that I'm working for this organization who's done so many great things over the years and built this capacity, and they've built these relationships. And, and then it took, this is not politically expedient work. I mean, people don't run a campaign on this kind of a platform. I'm going to make sure there's harm reduction. This is something that...
Not yet. Not yet.
I mean, and I'm just saying, and that's not to sound, because I am an eternal optimist. So I love that you said not yet. But historically, people have not been having harm reduction as part of their platform, or even for sheriffs who are, those are still elected positions, or working your way through the ranks of a police department up to captain or chief or lieutenant or detective. These aren't the sort of things that you kind of hunker down on and say, well, this is what I'm about. But through time, relationships have been built. And, Chief Bill Holling said and Robert Childs, they built a friendship, a lasting relationship years ago. And, I mean, I would be remiss if I didn't recognize all that hard work that was done years ago, the courage that Chief Hollingshead had to step out of what was pretty systematic for his line of work, and to say, okay, I want to look at this a little differently, and this makes sense, and this is an approach that I think we need to be taking. Yeah. And, not for nothing, I mean, 1 in 3 law enforcement officers will have a needle stick at some point in their careers. And then 25% of law enforcement officers who have 1 stick have another one. Yeah. And
astronomical numbers.
Yes, and you think about what that costs in terms of productivity, taxpayer dollars. I mean, the prophylactic treatment, last I looked, it was going for a few $1,000s, but I was told by an officer who had a needle stick injury a few years ago that it was $15,000 for his. And for 9 months of his life, he had to go and get tested every month. And he kind of shrugged it off as this thing that wasn't really that big of a deal. And then I created a space for him to really kind of think about that. And I was like, wow, I think about how stressful that must have been for you every time you had to go and walk into that office and get that test to ensure that you didn't contract a communicable disease. He was like, it was almost like I just saw these little light bulbs floating around. He was like, yeah, that was pretty stressful. So, and not that I'm here to enlighten anyone, please don't get me wrong, but I just felt like in that moment, even that was a moment to build a relationship with him, to give him a space to, just to hold that space for him. But I'm kind of rabbit holing here, but I think that it just takes a lot of time and a lot of courage and relationship building one by one, and really trying to find who are your champions, because there are still officers who don't necessarily find themselves aligning with a harm reduction philosophy or with LEAD. And I've had a couple of them tell me that, and that's okay. That's not a personal thing for me. I'm not going to internalize that, but I'm going to try to work on building their trust and to help them to see that when they are encountering a person and they feel like they're just at their kind of wits end with what to do, because maybe they've arrested this person in the past and then within 24 hours see the person out, or, and I'm just kind of giving some hypotheticals here.
Right.
And then maybe they might think about LEAD and see it as a viable option and trust that I'm a person who really does care and I'm going to do whatever I can to engage the person. So, yeah, it's small successes. And I think I approached things in my early 20s. I was fiery and I was really interested in being right and just full throttle in a lot of ways. And I know that I didn't approach people who have differing worldviews than mine in a way that was productive or effective. I know that. And I look back on that time, again, thankful for that capacity to reflect, and I think, what all did you accomplish during that time? And I did. I mean, it's not to say that all that was for nothing, but I'm just in a different space in my life now where I'm just not interested in being right. I'm just interested in understanding and building bridges and building relationships and getting the work done. I mean, people are dying, and we have to work together to address these complex issues. We have to find a way to set aside our ideals and our beliefs and really work in the interest of people.
Caleb, when you went to, was it Raleigh for recovery coach training, you were able to do a ride-along, and you guys participated in
post-overdose outreach type. Yeah. Hope Squad.
The Hope Squad. Is that something you're familiar with, Gariann?
I'm not familiar with the Hope Squad, but I do
That's what you do.
overdose outreach in Haywood County, and I am trying to build a robust team of people to go knock on doors.
Yeah, so what's the process? How does it work?
Yeah, sorry. Caleb was someone who, and he can still be a part of it, and anybody who wants to be a part of it.
Maybe I can volunteer.
Yes, that would be great if you could do that.
Come over there.
So officers in Haywood County, when there is a 911 service call for an overdose, there's a dual dispatch. So law enforcement officers and EMS are both dispatched, and whoever arrives first, if it is in fact an overdose, sometimes it's not. There was a potassium issue a couple weeks ago with this older fella. And so, fortunately it wasn't an overdose, but he got the care he needed. But I digress. So they're dispatched, and whoever arrives first, they administer naloxone and help to revive the person. And it's public record, so it may sound like a HIPAA violation, but it's not. But we want to ensure that we do not redisclose information, So anyway, so I'm informed, and within a couple days, I try to get out there and make contact with a person. Unfortunately, a lot of folks are very transient, and they may have overdosed in a home where they don't reside on a regular basis. So it's challenging at times to connect with folks, but I've had some really great interactions. And one particular individual I was able to connect, and again, I don't want to use pronouns here, but I was able to connect 4 times with this person and this person's significant other. And the person is still actively using, but the person knows that there are resources out there that their life has meaning and value, and that people in the community, strangers, care about them. And there's a handful of others. One person had actually overdosed and then got picked up on some warrants a couple days later, and I was able to connect with that person while they were in custody, and then met them on the day of their release and helped get the person connected to resources in the community, get a comprehensive clinical assessment. And they were interested in getting Suboxone, but the resources are pretty limited, and as I think most of us here know, that window of opportunity, when the person is ready to make some changes, it can change. And so we didn't get to follow through on all of the things that they had initially set out to do. But we're still in regular communication, and I'm going to meet with this person later in the week and try to work on some housing stuff, and just whatever way possible I can connect with people and connect them to resources. And, when people are, if they become ready to make some changes, then they know they got a support person out there who can help them. But I've been doing this work with the Sheriff's Office and with Waynesville PD and my colleague, Jeremy Sharp, but I want to follow up more than just once. So I'm really interested in getting a post-overdose response team developed. And so I met with the priest of the Grace Episcopal Church, Jocelyn Schaefer, recently, and she's on board with coming out. We've got some volunteers here tonight
I
who
would love
are
to
interested.
over there.
We could
I know.
have a whole team set up in like a week if that was.
We
Okay,
both have had
I
some
mean-
peer support training. Not only that, I used to live over there. I got out of
See.
jail one time, met some girls in jail.
This is awesome.
And
For anyone who
she-
can't see me, I'm
She's
like,
pumping.
yes.
And I just people tuning in. Like I know that there'd be you could form a team of a dozen people that would be willing to do that type of work.
Yeah.
You could.
and so what I want to do with it, I want to make sure that we're not knocking just once. And right
Yeah.
now, because we're kind of short staffed, if you will, it's hard to get back out there multiple times. And there are a handful of folks who I've been connecting with on a regular basis, but then there's a couple where I've only been out once
Yeah.
and no one answered, but I left information in the door. I left naloxone there for them. But I really want this team, and I want to find out every person who's overdosed in 2017. And I want to door knock. I want to try to find people. I read this study, where I'm from in West Virginia. It's pretty much been the epicenter of overdose. My community, my entire state was preyed upon in the mid-90s by these drug companies. And Huntington, their high water mark for overdoses, one day they responded to 24 in one day. So I read this report, and the CDC had partnered with the Department of Health and Human Resources in West Virginia, and they looked at 830 people who had fatally overdosed in the year of 2016, which would be the last year we actually can access data. And they found all these different points of intervention where somebody could have, or some system could have made an intervention. It's not to say that all 830 people would be alive today, but I think we'd be looking at some different numbers had we had some things in place. 71% of these people who had fatally overdosed had contact with emergency medical services in the 12 months prior to their death. 56% of them had been incarcerated. 91% of them were on the prescription monitoring controlled substances thing. I want to say that 75% of them had Medicaid. So there's all these different places in the year prior to their overdose
Or somebody could have been interceding.
where somebody could have done something. And we may never know all of the conversations that were had or what was really happening with that person. But I know for sure the 20 people who I've lost, people weren't knocking on their doors, and they weren't getting access to things
When someone
like harm reduction
overdoses,
services.
in Haywood County, prior to you going out and meeting with them or attempting to meet with them, are they sent home with Narcan automatically? Is that a part of any type of program?
No, and I'm working on that steadily. And I met with some social workers at Haywood Regional Hospital recently, and we're trying to figure out how to navigate the hospital regulations and what we can do.
Back to this topic.
We did, we did
always
set up.
something,
We did set up. We started a conversation, I should say, instead of we set up, but we started a conversation about how I can be a point person when somebody has been transported there after an overdose. If the person wants a warm handoff, they can call me and I can come out there. Because a lot of times, you know, that discharge planner is just trying to put a bunch of pamphlets and things in the person's hand, and then they're leaving. I mean, my very first referral, as I said, that person was walking home from the hospital after an overdose on foot. So, yeah, there's a lot of gaps.
Yeah.
And we just wrote a grant, and this is what I was trying to get Caleb to apply for it. We wrote a grant, and it's going to be, they're going to contract with NCRAW, but it's going to kind of, I don't know all the logistics of it, but it's through the health department in Haywood County, and it'll be for a peer support specialist who can, and the person doesn't have to be a certified peer support specialist, but it's our hope that they will have some lived experience and be able to go out and connect with people and do that outreach. And so we're working on getting an MOU with EMS and with the hospital. So if someone is transported there and they're open to connecting with us, you know, of course they would want to sign a release of information and that sort of thing. So we're working on that steadily. But at the very least, I just would love to know that if someone overdoses, that they then have naloxone in their possession.
Yeah. I mean, that should be like automatic.
So that's what we do. I mean, I
age.
leave it in doorways if someone doesn't answer, but I'm not getting I'm not getting contacted for every single overdose in the county. So there's a gap there.
Yeah.
And I want to ensure that we close that gap and that we just get to connect with people.
One thing I've heard you say.
families,
One
too.
thing I've heard you say a lot tonight is the soft handoffs, when you're connecting these individuals to resources in the community, is the soft handoff. But you've also kind of touched on, and what I kind of envision the biggest challenge to a program of this nature is the gaps in the resources that are available in a rural community like ours. Like these other lead programs that are in larger metropolitan areas that do have access to some pretty amazing resources that we just generally don't have. So you talked about meeting with a client and an individual and assessing their needs based off of Maslow's hierarchy. Like where are the gaps? Where are the opportunities for other grassroots organizations like Res Hope, like some of the stuff that we're doing with NCRAW? Where can somebody come in and kind of fill those gaps? Is it housing?
Housing.
Okay, so let's go there. Let's go there. Like, what would that look like? Like, because I had this conversation with Lori Clancy in her office today for like 2 hours. We were just like, the minds were just rolling. So like, what?
And she and I talked about that too the other day, and the lack of affordable, stable housing is, I mean, it's just non-existent. And transitional housing is almost non-existent. And I come from a housing first approach because I recognize Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We cannot expect people to change until they have the capacity to make some changes. And if someone is sleeping on the streets, or someone is returning to that tent, or they're returning to a home that's not safe for them, or safe for their recovery, or safe for them to make changes, then we can't expect to see people make lasting changes. And so there's
I watched
There's one shelter in the community. And they conduct your analysis. And I mean, I've got folks who they're not going to be able to pass. I don't want to say pass. They're going to test positive for your analysis. So I had
And
to
then
correct
how long
myself
did they
there.
have to wait before they're able to come back? To attempt to come back to a place like that?
I don't know
Not sure.
exactly, but I recognize that there are, I'm trying to figure out how to say this the right way, that there are reasons why people have these parameters in place.
Yeah.
And I understand where that comes from, but I also would really like to have some of those tough conversations and say, so what can we do about this? How can we start to think a little differently about this and
alternatives.
Yeah,
And
like
if he doesn't screen in here, where does he screen in?
Where does he screen in? And so, there's just in affordable and stable housing, there's a shortage of it. It's across the nation. And
I was watching a documentary on Thanksgiving called Over Criminalized on YouTube. It's only like a 25-minute documentary. They're talking about, they covered like the 3 areas that we've kind of hit on tonight: homelessness, LEADS program, and mental illness. And in the homelessness portion of the documentary, they hit on a city, and I'm not exactly sure what city, but like we all know, like in many larger scale metropolitan cities, like it's essentially become illegal to be homeless. Meaning, like if you are homeless and living on the street,
if you panhandle, we're
you-
going to arrest you.
just for sleeping on the street or sitting
Sure.
down on the sidewalk, like
Portland, Maine.
areas like that, they put you in jail like immediately, no questions asked, and like you go to jail, and they eventually get let out, and then literally arrested like the same night you were let out of jail for just for being homeless. So there was one city, and I do not remember where it was located, but they decided to do something like what you're describing. And they like kind of took a old
Salt Lake City, maybe.
It's Salt Lake City. That was it. They took
they're
like
really big on housing first out there.
Housing first. They took like a big condominium, and they decided to just provide this housing and case management. So you get free housing and case management. And what they, through research and whatever, they learned that it was costing them essentially $20,000 per individual on the street per year. So an individual on the street per year for being homeless, it was costing the city, the local jurisdiction,
to lock them up,
to do all that stuff. It was costing them.
Housing.
It was costing them $20,000 a year. It cost them $7,000 a year to give them a place to live, and case management. And then guess what happened? Just by putting a roof over their heads, almost 20 to 30% of those individuals started to figure life out on their own. They didn't even need all the other stuff. They didn't need they found jobs. They found, they started to live their lives. They didn't need all those other things just by putting a roof over their head. Now, the rest of the crew, they had a case manager that could connect them with additional resources and get them some substance abuse treatment or get them some employment assistance or whatever it was that they needed.
Shore up those strengths.
Yeah, but it started with just the housing, the little thing. And like around here, like I'm not familiar with Haywood County, but just in this local area, like I don't know if it's because of this type of like police kind of enforcement, but I don't see a lot of individuals in the public eye. You know what I mean? Like they're around, but it's not. I don't know if it's like that, the stigma and the fear, and they're not like.
I think there's for sure people who are experiencing housing insecurity and experiencing homelessness, and they may be able to double up with a friend or family member for a certain period of time and kind of move about from house to house, if you will. I know there was recently a little setup near the Frog Level District in Haywood County in Waynesville where there were several tents, and they just, they pushed that out. And so It's just
Is this something that's like on their radar of like addressing housing?
yes, and there's actually the county is approaching a. Gosh, I don't want to misspeak and call it something that it's not, but there is some sort of a community land trust ordinance or policy or something that's happening at the county level. And there's been some opportunity for public comment and people to kind of weigh in because this land trust will effectively alter and determine the shape, I should say, the trajectory of housing for the next 30 years or so in Haywood County. And I think every community probably has this sort of thing at some point in their political landscape, if you will, to determine what are we going to do with land, and are we going to build more, real estate? Is it going to be like what's going to how are we going to use land, and are we going to ensure that the units are affordable? Are we going to provide for single unit or family unit, multi-family unit kind of thing? But honestly, I mean, I look at housing as like, there's some solutions out there. I mean, how many of you have been on an interstate where you pass a wide load truck and then you see a house that's in pieces?
Yeah, dude.
Coming down the interstate. Those things only take a few months to put together.
And they're reasonably affordable.
They're reasonably affordable.
Yeah.
We've got tiny houses.
That's what I was about to say.
I'm all
Those
about tiny
little
houses. Banks will not give you a loan on a tiny house. You know why?
Because you can move it. It's not a
No.
house. Why?
Because you don't have to wait 30 years to pay it off.
Oh, yeah. They want that.
Yeah.
They want that
They
interest.
want that interest.
Yeah.
So, and I have a friend who just built a tiny house for $10,000. No, he did a lot of the labor. He was able to repurpose some wood and different materials to build the home. It's beautiful. But I think about the political will. Where is the political will to ensure that people's needs are met? And I mean, I just want to say that, like, there's so many social issues that are influencing where people are at and effectively keeping people in their place.
Yeah. I feel like we're talking in circles here.
Yeah.
We
Like,
are,
kinda
and
like-
I know I keep
yeah.
kind of
Well,
coming
no,
back
it's not.
to the same
it's
things.
just it's the
but
conversation, but it's not
I
even
mean-
tonight. It happens every week. It's not just tonight, right? It's the same old, same old.
And-
Sorry,
I'm
dude.
sore, man.
And I recognize that the disease model propelled us, in leaps and bounds to helping reduce stigma and helping people to understand what's happening for an individual who has a substance use disorder and they're in a problematic state with that. But I think that part of that, still, it goes back to that individual, and we're not looking at all the social issues that are compounding what's happening at a neurobiological level. Let's look at what is happening on a socio-political level that's influencing that behavior and compounding it, and
The root
people
cause.
are finding themselves entrenched in it. And housing is healthcare.
Yeah,
It's healthcare.
absolutely.
But we struggle with that.
But we struggle with that, So, like, what does health mean?
Define health.
Define health in terms of
Don't get
where
me
we're at.
started.
But I could just, I think it's clear that I can just I can just bounce from soapbox to soapbox.
Yeah.
But that's fun.
For
That's
better,
fun.
for worse, but I hope that somebody asked where my heart was, I think, at the beginning of this.
What?
That what you asked me? Where's your heart? And I said, right here. But
No, that wasn't me.
He's got a mouthful of ice. Don't mind that.
but I hope it's clear where it's at, But yeah. I
So,
forget what the question
was barriers,
but
barriers.
the barriers, housing is a
Yeah.
huge barrier, and then being able to access resources and treatment. We
So
have
that goes back to the healthcare and
Right,
funding and costs and
we did not expand Medicaid in this state.
in other states that did have seen a direct impact
Yes.
in the overdose rate
Yes.
declining.
Yes,
in,
they have.
in a very short period of time.
Yes, they
A
have.
high number, like up to 50% in some 50% in some areas, a 50% decline in less than a year just by expanding Medicaid.
Yeah. So we didn't expand Medicaid, and now we're at this opportunity, and you can weigh in the public can weigh in until November 30th on the what are they calling it for our Medicaid? I don't want to say revitalization, but it's a lesson in semantics. Sorry, DHHS, but I'm just going to keep it real that it's still not enough. And one of their priorities, I was at a summit actually it was a month ago, and there was a person there speaking about this new and improved, these changes to Medicaid, and this person said that one of the priorities is housing, and of course my hand shot up, and I said, y'all, you got money for housing? You got resources? And there was kind of this circuitous response where I just was my mind was still reeling when the person stopped talking. I was like, I still don't know. It's just not enough. So housing is a major issue.
What are
accessing treatment.
What are the arguments against expanding Medicaid other than just financial greed?
I mean,
I'm gonna be direct.
Yeah,
man.
that's a pretty.
Yeah.
That's it.
I've not heard one that's viable, and I've not heard one that let me.
Because we talked earlier tonight about you maturing as an adult and being able to see things from the other side of the argument and being able to understand and somewhat reason, whether you agree with somebody or not, reason with them.
I think sometimes people really get caught up. I think we're very socialized in the Western part of the world to want immediate gratification and to have these really kind of myopic. Our scope is myopic. We're not looking to the future. We're not looking at the ripple effect or the underbelly of this piece of legislation or how this might impact people 10 years from now or 20 years from now. I think people are really focused on the here and now, and I'll argue for the here and now for a lot of things. I'm a firm believer in mindfulness practices, but I think when it comes to legislation and policy, we really need to be thinking beyond the here and now and what is this going to look like for people. And I don't think people recognize some of that stuff, especially when they think about, I think it's only like 10 cents for a sterile syringe. And what did we just say earlier? 90,000 to treat hepatitis C, 500,000 to treat someone over their lifetime who has HIV. So, but in that myopic field of vision, you may have somebody thinking, well, I'm not going to encourage substance use, or I don't want.
Enabling. You're
so
just helping the problem.
Yeah, I think it's really trying to see beyond ourselves. And
just a quick Google search: Doctors for America promoting the expansion of Medicaid in the state of North Carolina. The Medicaid expansion will save North Carolina $65.4 billion over the next 8 years as other safety net programs become less necessary. Expanding Medicaid in North Carolina will create 23,000 high-paying permanent jobs.
Really?
Because people gaining access to care. And the total economic impact of the Medicaid expansion is estimated at $1.4 billion. It says that if they do so, 650,000 North Carolina residents will have access to Medicaid and health care services who don't currently have it today. So, I mean, that's just like in a matter of like 2 minutes of just like looking, I don't see an argument against it.
And I'm so glad you looked that up, because that needs to be broadcasted. People need to know those numbers. And
Yeah, so check out doctorsforamerica.org. That's where that information came from, and like do your research, but I think that it's kind of a no-brainer. The reason why I asked you about that was because last week in the New York Times, they were talking about Dayton, Ohio. Are you familiar? Thank you, Tatiana Vereen.
thank you. So good to
My
meet
man
you guys.
Demetrius. Hey, let me get the Instagram one more time. Tati's Vision Photography. She came in and took some photographs of us this evening. So check out her Instagram. She's got some badass shots that she's been taking.
You're amazing.
You're amazing.
Thank
Good
y'all.
night.
Good night. So good to meet you.
Dayton, Ohio, right? That was one of the communities that reduced overdose rates significantly in less than a year. And that was one of the things that they did, was Ohio did expand Medicaid. But just so far this year, in comparison to 548 overdose deaths last year, there's only been 250, a 54% decline.
Wow.
Right. So the question is, what did they do? Right. You're talking about Dayton, Ohio, pretty somewhat populated community.
Yeah.
Off the top of my brain, I would guess it's probably similar in comparison to Asheville, if not maybe a little larger. I don't know. I'm just guessing.
Asheville, I think, has 80,000.
80,000?
Maybe.
Okay. But the first thing they did is Medicaid expansion, hugely increase access to treatment. So by giving access to Medicaid, individuals were able to get into treatment. The second thing that's kind of that goes in line with that, and it kind of goes with what you're doing on the regular, that I think might be something worth entertaining collectively for all of us, is in Dayton, they would host every other month, they would host a dinner called Conversations for Change. And it's an opportunity for people, current drug users, to show up and have a meal and sit down at the table with treatment providers and people who are legitimate resources in the community. So it's an open invitation. It's like every other month, not too regularly, but enough where like somebody like Res Hope could, or NCRAW could pay the bill for the food. You know, we provide food. We invite all the resource providers and treatment providers there, and just create those relationships, have those conversations.
That's pretty much like what
That's what you're doing.
Thanksgiving
right?
did. Yeah, I mean, we not only was we just wanting to pass out plates, we were wanting to sit down and have conversations, but, you know, to get a team of...
They had a dozen, at the last meeting, they had a dozen resource tables set up at this event. And they're not inviting people in recovery like us. They're inviting people who are using drugs.
Absolutely.
Like, and you guys
How
did
many
that.
Did we?
Y'all did that.
We need to go ahead and give a praise report.
Yeah.
We haven't even talked about that. I mean, that's pretty significant.
We planned on, I planned to have enough food for 150 people. And that's including, you know, volunteers, whoever came out, families, whatever. And we ended up having over 300. Approximately 300 people came that signed in. There are some people that didn't sign in. And it's wild. We had enough food. We actually have food left over. People brought extra food. And there's a lot of people that was experiencing homelessness, and a lot of people that were, you know, haven't found recovery yet. Or there was a girl, she just got out of prison that morning and come straight to our dinner that evening. And, you know, they didn't just come and get their plate of food and go. It wasn't like, oh, it's a free dinner, I'm going to go grab a free Coke and a free dinner.
Loved.
They stayed and they sat. And, you know, the big thing was that we noticed was, like, we knew a barrier for people was going to be transportation. So Caleb went and talked to Cherokee Transit, and they agreed they wanted to help with what we were doing and provided free transportation. And it was like late that night, and the last transit bus, you know, I think it was Bianca, come in and was like transit's out here for whoever's needing a ride home, and a big group
of people jump on transit, and they didn't even have phones. They was borrowing people's phones to call transit to come to the dinner
and head home. Free
and
ride.
we just got to have conversations with them, and that's the type of stuff that we do in our classes and stuff. Like when we put on our posts, like we're world changers, we're building leaders. That's what we empower the people that work with us to do, is not to just sit there and ask those closed-ended questions, but to ask the open-ended questions and to have conversation with them. And it's not like, well, do you want to go to treatment? Like first, it's just showing them love and being able to have those conversations, like you said. And what would it look like, if we do get a lot more people like that that work in various treatment places, just to have those cathartic conversations, Yeah,
the article goes on to kind of cover, everything else that they're doing in that community, and the only other things that they're doing is exactly what is already taking place here. The only missing piece to that puzzle, to that 54% reduction in overdose,
it's healthcare.
The healthcare. Yeah. Everything else is doing access to Narcan, Narcan being readily available and everywhere. Check, right? We're doing that. More support for people when treatment ends, like community-based resources, housing, but just like that. Peer supports and fellowships. Yes. Check. We're doing that. Yeah. I would say fairly well in comparison to other parts of the country. And the last thing was, ready for this? Police and public health workers actually agree in working together on things. Check. Right? So you got your bases covered.
Not us.
It's a choice. It's a choice. That's why I smiled at you.
We've been having these tribal action plan committees
hold that
now.
Hope for you.
And
it's going to happen.
It is going to happen.
It is going to happen.
We just got to keep inviting them, and eventually they're going to show up. But we've been having these tribal action plan committees, and basically that's what it is. All the resources from the reservation are coming together and forming this plan, and it's data driven. And so we've had law enforcement show up the first time, and then it was like, you could just tell that
you invited
they're not
them,
there yet.
You invited them, and they didn't come back?
They send emails out every time,
Well, it will happen.
We love them.
You're persistent.
Yes.
You're persistent.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
And
we got the prosecutor on our side though. The tribal prosecutor is a huge
that's
advocate.
huge. That's kind of what's happening in Buncombe County right now, and they're really working towards getting a diversion program. They don't know if it will be branded as lead or what it will look like, but they've got some of the key players.
Well, the chief, I spoke to him at our community dinner the other night, and he's wanting to go to see the Hope Squad, and I told him about what y'all are doing and everything, and we need to, I'm sure he'd love to come over there and see what y'all are doing.
Whatever I can do to help, if it's getting on the phone with somebody and talking a little bit about what we're doing out here, or coming over to Cherokee and meeting with folks. I don't have all the answers, and we're just getting started. But I think we've got such a foundation to be able to do this work. And that didn't, like I said, it didn't happen overnight. I mean, there was a lot of people who had courage, and a lot of people who just opened their minds up to something else and said, all right, what are we going to do to get in front of some of these problems and not be looking back? I mean, I hate to say it, but I feel like West Virginia is now looking back and saying, what has happened in the last 25 years? And
we got a friend up there I was telling you about, Tim Kraft.
He's doing
their overdose rate in the county he lives in is declined by over 50% from 16 to 17. He's out just doing some amazing work. We got to see him last night, but he's from Parkersburg.
I would love to meet him.
Yep.
There's a couple really good documentaries out there on West Virginia. It's on Netflix. One is called
Farm one or something.
Yeah. Recovery Boys.
That's good.
Yeah.
Starstruck.
I did get starstruck. I met one of the guys who was in that film, and He is now working as a peer support specialist, I believe, at a place in Morgantown, West Virginia, which is the town where I went to college. And I ran into him at this little festival in my hometown, and I was like, oh my goodness. And then I went up to him and I said, I don't want to do this. I don't want to harass you, but
I
are
told
you?
Caitlin. I was telling Caitlin about
That's
it.
pretty cool. One of them became a recovery coach, didn't they?
Yeah, that's the guy.
Is that the
And
okay,
he
yeah.
actually, so I gave him my card, and he actually reached out about a month ago. I was in New Orleans at
That's
the
awesome.
national conference for harm reduction, and I missed his call, and I saw West Virginia show up on my work phone, and no one knows my phone number in West Virginia except for this guy. And he called and left me a voicemail, wanted to know how things are going down here in North Carolina and how we are utilizing the role of a peer support specialist. And I called him back. I got his voicemail. So we're playing a little phone tag. But I'm hoping at some point when I go home and I have a little bit of time, maybe to just sit down with him and chat about the work we're doing, learn from him, you know, what's working up there for them. And, yeah, if there's anything that we're doing down here that can be translated and transferable in West Virginia, I would love for that to happen because, yeah, there's a lot of heartache there.
You've played an
Lot of loss.
instrumental role in a short period of time in this local community, like initiating that change, right? We talked about how it's a process. Where I come from, there's a beginning, a middle, and an end to everything, right? You've played an instrumental role in all of that, in the beginning of this monumental thing. In a perfect world, where does this story end?
Well, I am
Wow.
humbled that you would say I'm playing an instrumental role. Like I said, I come as one, but by way of many.
We all do.
I think that was a Maya Angelou quote as well. Love that woman. Gosh, in a perfect world, you know, I want to see people who are. Okay, so I envision a world where the pathologizing and the language of suffering is transformed, and there's resiliency, and there's recovery, and there's prevention and healing. And I want to live in that kind of world, and I want to be a part of the work that advances the health, safety, and dignity of people who use drugs. And I want to see people who are housing insecure or experiencing homelessness. I want to see people housed. I mean, I'm somebody, and I don't want to not recognize my own privilege, because several of the ways in which my social identities intersect provides me with a level of privilege that a lot of people will never know. But I did lose my home when I was young. I mean, I've been uprooted. I would move out of my mom's house all the time when I was growing up, and then left my house after she died. And, you know, I've not really had a real sense of home for a long time. I've always felt kind of one foot in, one foot out. So on some level, despite having a roof over my head, like always having a house, so to speak, but not really knowing what home always meant or looked like or felt like, I think in a really small way, I understand what folks, a little bit of what they're experiencing. And so that's really important for me, is to see people to get housed and to find a home, and to be able to transcend survival mode and to enter into a space where they're thriving. And that doesn't have to mean 100% abstinence from all substances. I want to see people's relationships to their substance or substances change in a way that is for their health and well-being, that is for the health and well-being of the community at large. You know, by no means am I sitting over here trying to advance the continuance of substance use, but I just want to say that, you know, that may not be, you know, that may be the metrics of recovery for a lot of people, but that may not be the metrics of recovery or success, the way in which we measure somebody's success or for everybody, if that makes sense. You know, I think we live in a land of a lot of broken promises, and I've touched on a handful of those. I think that we've got this really beautiful Constitution. We've got this really beautiful preamble and these ideas and these ideals in America, but we have really fallen short of delivering on a lot of those things. And I've been seeing that since I was a little girl, you know. I mean, there's still kids in this country in the 21st century. They don't know where their next meal is coming from. And if you followed, I know I'm rambling here.
No, that's
but
it. I mean,
if you followed that teacher strike in West Virginia, which I'm so proud of, I mean, it gives me chills. I'm so proud of those teachers for standing up, and they didn't just stand up for their own salaries. They stood up for the salaries of law enforcement officers, for the cooks, for the custodians in those schools. But before they went out on strike every day, they were packing lunches for kids. They were ensuring that the kids who couldn't be in the classroom and get their breakfast or their lunch that day could have a meal. I don't want to live in that. I mean, I want to live in the kind of world where there is compassion like that, but where that's the reality, that
there shouldn't be even a conversation that
shouldn't
we're
even
having.
be a conversation we're having in the 21st century.
With the
But
amount
so-
of resources that are accessible
Right.
to our society.
You know, we got people, I mean, I'm working with someone right now who's sleeping in a tool shed. That place isn't even fit for rats. So whatever I can do to be a support person, and I know these things are not going to happen overnight, but, you know, I want to get involved in housing. I don't know what that's going to look like, and I keep finding myself, I'm always doing this, just keep finding something that you're really passionate about and say yes, and then but I want to make sure that I'm prepared for the work and that I've got it in me to do the work and advocate or whatever. But yeah, I think that's going to be a huge piece to helping people.
Circling back.
Yeah. And it's like we finally live in a time, I should say. There are actually some pretty good jobs in Haywood County right now. There's there's the paper mill, and there's Giles Chemicals, and there's good paying jobs. I'm not saying that people are going to find meaning and purpose doing this work, but they may be able to make a living where they can find their meaning and purpose in other things in their lives. They can, develop their hobbies and their spiritual foundation, and they can, help their children thrive and that sort of thing with some of these wages. But there's a shortage of workers right now, of people who are even able to be job ready. And I think it's really systemic. And I mean, I get these emails all the time about these job fairs, and there's a lot of folks I'd love to see them be able to get employed like that, or whatever they've got to do to get their needs met. But
Everything that you just described circles back to a conversation that we had last week, and also a conversation that we had earlier this evening before the show started. I'll ask you this now that we've laid it on the table, had a moment to reflect a little bit. Are you the ripple Or are you the wave?
I think I'm just a little ripple.
Are you being humble here?
No, I think I'm being real. I had this little saying I used to say in my early 20s where I didn't want to just be a drop in the ocean. I wanted to be the ocean, and I'd say it very emphatically, and as I'm saying it now, maybe even throw a cuss word in there for emphasis. And then
now we're talking.
And I think that young people, gosh, I'm so inspired by young people because they're so fervent and on fire. They're just so passionate. And I think I had a lot of that in me, and I still do. I don't ever want to lose sight of that, but it's tempered a bit. And as we get older, unfortunately, we come face to face with a lot of realities, and we realize that these ideals, at some point, we have to reconcile them with what's real, what can we actually accomplish? And so
achievable goals.
Yes, and figuring out how to work together and build bridges to achieve these things, and not just staying on our own, not over here spinning my wheels thinking I'm right, you're wrong, and really not getting anything done, but just hating on each other. So I say all that I think there was a time when I thought in that way, and now I just want to shine my light, my little corner of the world, and have my little ripples and impact people, in small ways. I think I would love to be the wave. I think that's what you asked me, but
that is what I asked you.
I don't know if
the old Zen quote, I don't know who said it, but the old Zen quote, like, freedom is when the wave discovers he's the ocean.
No, but and I can't do any of this on my own. Like I said, I'm standing on a lot of shoulders, and I'm standing with a lot of people alongside me. And even, people like my sisters, my family, I'm so dreamy, and I'm okay being that person. But I'm allowed to be that person because I have all these people who have been holding ground for me for a long time. So I could go out there and wild out and,
but that dreamy
be
person,
poetic and
that dreamy
dreamy.
person is the one that travels the world, right? That dreamy person.
Herself.
Yeah, by herself. Like, that dreamy person is the one that takes advantage of these experiences and opportunities. All right. This wouldn't be NCRAW. You wouldn't be at the table with Mr. Caleb McCoy and myself if we did not ask you about personal goals. What's next for Gariann? Personally, not professionally, not leads program, harm reduction, housing, all the amazing things that you're doing every day.
I think I told you about my vision board
you
that
did.
I have. So it's really important for me I've been flirting with a spiritual dimension in my life for a long time. And I go through these periods where I'm disciplined and I'm really focused and I'm meditating and I'm feeling good about things and feeling grounded. But then life gets in the way, and I think it's easy for us we can move our priorities around on the list, and what we end up prioritizing sometimes is not what we know is best for us or what we know is going to hold us all together to be able to do the work we do. But so no one can make me do any of that. It's got to be I have to be driven to do it, and I am, and I'm welcoming winter as a space to give me that time and to slow me down a bit to really get right with myself and to get grounded again and develop that spiritual dimension. So that's really important for me. And then I really want to get back to my roots, and I want land, and I really want to I want to put food on my table that I've grown, and I do that I have a garden, and I've done that off and on for years. There's been a couple years in my adult life where I've just not been grounded enough to put anything in the ground. But
You
whatever
get
that
ready to come to
means.
Bryson and Silva, though,
But-
right? And check out some of that. Remember you was talking about, you don't know if
Yeah.
Asheville's kind of...
So, yeah, I'm getting outpriced in Asheville.
You
and
are.
plus,
You totally are.
It's outgrowing me. I mean, and I've got a restless spirit. But I think what I'm really focused on now is like, I can dispel that restlessness through travel, but I want to know home. I really do. And I am determined to know and feel that and experience that in a real way. And so getting some land and really rooting myself down, because I've spent so much of my life renting and just kind of hopping from one lease to the next. And it's been great. I mean, you know, being a renter has been good for me, being single and not wanting to fix the toilet, but just calling the landlady or landlord and saying, can you call the plumber? Or, you know, but I mean, those are all, like, I want all those skills.
Yeah, YouTube can fix any of that
And
stuff,
yeah,
man.
but I do, you know, and I did construction for a little while. I love labor. So I'm digressing.
Where do I find these pictures?
Oh, I've got some on my phone,
Do you?
actually.
Okay.
Oh, yeah. I restored this century-old home. It was, oh my gosh, it was crazy. I had all this coal dust. I got like poisoned from it. I
From
was
coal.
sick for like 3 or 4 days, and I couldn't figure out what it was. It was like I couldn't eat anything. Everything was kind of my gag reflex. And I'm like, oh, you inhaled all that coal
ate a
dust for
bunch of coal.
days, you know. But so getting back to what I'm really saying here is, yeah, I want land, and I want to share my life with somebody, and I got that on my vision board, and I love to write. You laughing
What are you
at
laughing
me?
at, man?
I was thinking, I'm not laughing at you. I'm not laughing at you. I thought what you said was cute.
Any single
laughing at
men
you,
out
yeah.
there? No, just kidding. But anyone interested in growing some food?
Let's
But-
talk about recipes. No, just kidding.
Oh, I love to cook.
Yeah.
I love to cook and bake, and most of my food is plant-based, so I really love that. Adding that element to the art of cooking and baking is really cool, like especially to have like something that's traditionally meat and make it vegan. I'm like, yeah, that's
I
good.
knew that Caleb would pop on your vision board.
What,
Yeah.
the plant-based stuff?
No, just the vision board in general.
Yeah. So and I got my writing on there. I've been working on a book, and I table it, and sometimes I won't pick it up for a year or two, but I'm also trying to realize there's other things I enjoy writing. I've been writing a lot of songs lately, and I'm working on, I call it my Outlaw Country album.
Wow, that's pretty cool.
Kayla can play the banjo.
Yeah, she can. She can.
So I learned to pick a little bit this summer, but oh goodness, I don't play banjo, but I can like do a couple little things
She
on
can
there.
pick,
But
yeah.
we should get
I
together
can
and play some
play a
music.
few
totally
songs,
should.
and that's like
Let's do a Res Hope.
Yeah.
Banjo,
banjo,
picking.
whatever.
Yeah.
What's
so
your album?
Banjo picking night.
Yeah.
we'll have to get together and play
She
some
sings
music.
now. She's doing worship at church. So.
Kaylin?
That's awesome. I sing a little bit, but my friend Emily is an amazing singer. So whenever we get together and play music, I just kind of listen.
so you
We're just
write
gonna
the
get together
music
and break
and then
bread.
Break
we-
bread.
We have to do that.
I
For
know.
real.
I ain't even gonna lie.
I-
I was a little jelly that I didn't get to come have coffee.
Well, we'll just make that happen. So maybe we can do that next week or something.
yeah, I'm
whenever-
not. I
whatever
work
works
during the
for you.
mornings though.
Well, we'll
during-
figure
I'll
it
be
out.
starting on
I'm going
Monday,
to come out
my
to
new
the
job.
reservation.
Yeah, let's go eat.
Yeah,
What do
she's
you-
would
wanting
love
us
that.
to show her around and everything.
I would love that.
You need to introduce us to some of these Indian tacos and fry bread I keep hearing about.
We're getting ready to do. We need to do a fundraiser.
Why are you looking at me like that?
We want to do a fundraiser.
I'd love to be
You
Indian.
out
guys
there.
can eat them.
Yeah.
Oh, ain't on the diet.
And I regret that I didn't make it out on that
Healthy eating.
Thanksgiving
No.
Not a
it's-
diet.
dinner. My
Oh.
goodness.
Yeah, it was good
Yeah.
though.
So yeah, working on my writing, getting myself grounded, getting a home, getting a partner,
Are you think you ever have any
a
kids?
dog. I want a lot of dogs.
No.
We had this conversation.
Well, the
other
kid
day.
thing.
Yeah.
The kid thing.
Oh goodness.
kid
No.
That's why you said you want a lot of dogs. That just,
I want a lot. I love animals. I want some cows. I won't do anything
wants a farm.
with them, but love them. I don't want to eat them.
Mhm.
But kids. So I love being an auntie, and I really want to be a better auntie. I don't live near my nieces or my nephews. My nieces are 2 hours away. My nephews are in West Virginia. And so I miss out on so much of what they're up to, and they're growing and all that, and it makes me really sad. But I've thought for a long time that maybe that was just supposed to be my role. And it might just be my role. But I've also, off and on for years, I've thought about, my mom was a twin, and we had 22 sets of twins in my family.
What?
Yeah, like they go
Wow.
way back.
You know where she's going with this, right?
So I thought, well, I'll be 38 next month. That window's kind of closing. I mean, some people are like, "Oh no, girl, you got it till 45," and I'm like, "Oh no, about all that."
Nowadays, that's that's the hip thing to do.
That's what I hear.
It is.
45 is
It
the new
is.
25
It
or
is.
something. But anyway, so maybe I got a few more years than I would expect, but I want to have a healthy pregnancy, and if I do, but.
And maybe get the vision, the man first.
It'd be, yes, of course. Yes, of course. Yeah, that's got to happen. Like, we need to, go grab a cup of coffee.
That's part of your vision board, though. I mean, a lot of people, they run out ahead of it. You know what I mean? So
Well, and I
just
want
settle
Right.
for any
Yeah.
old body.
Oh,
You
no.
know?
You're
Put
right.
that on your list of goals. And
No, I won't do that. I just, no. I want it to be right. Whatever that means. And they say sometimes you think you know exactly what you want, and then you don't always know. But anyway.
She's rolling. Essentially,
Hell-
what she's
hell
trying to
if I
say.
know.
What she's trying to say, she's rolling the dice for twins.
No, but yeah, so that'd be pretty cool. Just knock it out in one shot, one and done. But then you get two, and what would
Yeah.
be really cool is if I had a boy and a girl, because then I'd just say, yeah, I got to have my son and my daughter.
Problem
But
solved.
no, I just went to my best friend's house up in D.C. We went to college together. We got really close, and she had two boys. She had twins, 2 boys, and they're 2.5. I was up there in early November. Oh my goodness. They're so cute. They are so wild. And it's like whack-a-mole. You think you got one, and then you turn around and the other one's like tearing up this corner of the house. And I'm like, oh my goodness, this is a lot. It's a lot. But yeah, I don't know. It's hard to tell. But hey, here's the dreaming, right?
Here's the dreaming.
That was a really long
So listen, Gariann,
answer. I know I've said that a lot tonight.
we are gonna have to wrap this up.
Party's
it's
over?
about,
This is-
about 12 o'clock.
I got news for you. I got news for you. This is the longest podcast we've ever done.
Mhm.
Oh my.
You know
Got
how,
the record, Gariann.
you know how long we've been
we'll
sitting
make a
here?
belt.
How long?
3 hours and 15 minutes.
Are you serious?
Yeah, man.
I mean, I'm a talker,
That's a good job.
but I
That's
didn't think
awesome.
I did not think I'd be able to talk in this microphone.
I know she was
I was so nervous.
really nervous.
So-
yeah.
Now, to go back and listen to it, I don't know when I'm going to have the
3 hours
capacity
and
to
15
do that. Well, I mean, because I'm too shy. I'll probably
We'll make you.
That's
know,
why
just-
We'll make you.
we know that when you have coffee with Gariann, you better
Yeah.
plan for hours.
because you just get such deep conversations like this.
I love to talk. I love to connect with people. I really do.
Sorry, buddy.
I hope
And
that
You're good at it.
um,
You're good
Caitlin's
at it.
over there
thank
like
you.
Yeah,
You're
you are.
good at it. You guys are all amazing, and I just want you to know what an honor this was. And I said to both of you, I don't think you have the right person for this. I don't really know what it is I have to say,
But you proved tonight
but I talked
that
for
we
3
had,
hours and 15 minutes.
Yeah, you proved tonight that we did have the right person.
Yeah.
You proved it.
Well,
So
you're very kind and generous, but I admire each of you, and I am so grateful to know each of you and to be able to call you my friends and my colleagues and to be able to work together. And
We're honored to have you on the Res Hope board.
I look forward to staying connected with each of you and really doing some great stuff out there.
That's
And
what it's about.
I look forward to resetting this conversation in 6 months or 8 months to see where the LEADS program goes and what's next and how do we expand that to other counties and just all of those conversations. I look forward to doing that again and just kind of like monitoring what's happening
and
with
check
the work you're doing.
on the twins.
On the vision
On
board.
the twins.
Checking on the twins. See, you
Get the man. Get
you
the
challenge
twins.
her. Yeah, you challenge her to find the man first, and then there you go, jump into the twins.
Oh my goodness.
So
We got people dropping comments. Hey, tell
probably
Gariann,
are.
Hey, what's up?
okay, yeah.
no, not if they're looking at this camera.
I got Billy in Oklahoma City. He wants your phone number. I'm just kidding.
This is hilarious.
So listen, thank you guys
said
for
you like to travel.
you say you like to travel, Oklahoma
Yes.
City. Thank you guys for tuning in this evening to this wonderful conversation. Real quick, I just wanted to dedicate. You got something?
Saturday.
Yeah, I got that after.
Okay.
I got that after. I lost a very close friend on Friday night, the day after Thanksgiving. Just unexpectedly, on some confusing circumstances that like are hard to wrap my mind around. So, in closing out the show tonight, I just want to dedicate the show to my best friend's memory, Jason Borum. I love you, dog. I will miss you, and I love you, Jen. And you guys are just so close to me and to my heart right now. So, thank you guys for tuning in.
Thank you. Big love.
Big love, y'all.
Love you.